The jet engine screamed as metal tore apart at 30,000 feet. Victoria Hale, youngest billionaire CEO in America, grabbed her armrest while her assistant Liam Carter shielded himself instinctively. Within seconds, everything she'd built, the empire, the reputation, the carefully constructed walls around her heart, meant absolutely nothing. The only thing between her and death was this quiet single father she'd barely noticed for 3 years. And as the aircraft plummeted toward the wilderness below, one terrible thought cut through her terror. She was about to die, never having truly lived. If you want to see how Victoria and Liam survive what comes next, stay until the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Victoria Hale's reflection stared back at her from the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, 53 stories above Manhattan. At 30 years old, she'd already graced the covers of Forbes, Fortune, and Time. The business world called her a visionary. Her competitors called her ruthless. Her employees called her ma'am, and nothing else. She preferred it that way. "Your 3 o'clock is here," Liam's voice came through the intercom, steady and professional as always. Victoria didn't turn from the window. "Tell Morrison I need 5 more minutes." "Already told him 10. He's getting impatient." The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Liam Carter had been her executive assistant for 3 years, and he was the only person in the building who could manage her schedule, her temper, and her impossible standards without cracking. He was also the only person who occasionally pushed back, gently, carefully, but he pushed nonetheless. She'd never asked why a 32-year-old man with his competence worked as an assistant instead of climbing his own corporate ladder. She'd never asked about the picture of the little girl he kept on his desk. She'd never asked about the dark circles under his eyes some mornings, or why he occasionally took calls in hushed, worried tones in the hallway. Victoria Hale didn't ask personal questions. Personal meant messy, and messy meant vulnerable, and vulnerable meant weak. "Send him in," she said. The meeting with Morrison lasted 45 minutes. He wanted to renegotiate terms on a manufacturing contract. Victoria listened, her face expressionless, while he presented his case with the confidence of someone who thought he had leverage. He didn't. When he finished, she leaned forward slightly. "Your proposal would cost my company $17 million over 3 years. In exchange, you're offering me absolutely nothing I can't get from your competitors for $12 million. So here's my counteroffer. You take the original terms, or I call Chen Industries before you reach the elevator." Morrison's face reddened. "Victoria, that's—" "Ms. Hale," she corrected, her voice dropping 10 degrees. "And my offer expires when you leave this office." He signed. They always signed. After Morrison left, Victoria returned to her window. The city sprawled below her, millions of people in their small lives with their small problems. She'd climbed above all of it, built something that mattered, created an empire that would outlast her name. So why did it feel like standing in an empty room? "Your car's ready," Liam said from the doorway. She hadn't heard him enter. "Flight leaves at 6. I've got your briefing materials for the investor retreat, your dietary preferences sent ahead to the resort, and backup chargers for all your devices." Victoria finally turned to look at him. Liam was average height, average build, with brown hair that was slightly too long and never quite styled right. He wore off-the-rack suits that didn't fit perfectly. Nothing about him should have stood out, but his eyes were different. They were calm in a way that nobody else's were. Patient, like he'd seen harder things than her temper and lived through worse than her deadlines. "You packed the Yamamoto contracts?" she asked. "In the red folder, left side of your briefcase. Also packed aspirin, because you always get headaches when Sullivan starts talking about blockchain." That actually did make her smile, just barely. "Sullivan's pitching blockchain again?" "Third time this year." "Tell me why I keep him on the board." "Because his venture capital connections are worth the headache." Liam held out her coat. Literally. She took it, their fingers brushing for half a second. "Are you packed?" Something flickered across his face. "I'm not going." Victoria froze with her coat half on. "Excuse me?" "I found a replacement. Marcus from legal. He's sharp, he knows the investors, and he won't mess up your schedule." "I didn't ask for a replacement. I asked for you." Liam met her eyes, and for once, that calm exterior cracked just slightly. "My daughter's in a school play tomorrow night. I promised her 6 months ago I'd be there." Victoria stared at him. She'd known he had a daughter. The picture on his desk proved that. But the details of his life outside this office were foreign territory she'd never bothered to explore. "The retreat is 3 days," she said carefully. "And the play is tomorrow night. I can't miss it." "Liam," she kept her voice level, professional. "This is the Silverton Investor Group. They're committing $200 million to the Singapore expansion. I need someone I trust." "You can trust Marcus." "I don't know Marcus." "You know me." His voice stayed gentle, but something in it had steel underneath. "And you know I've never asked for time off in 3 years. Not once, not for holidays, not for sick days, not for anything. I'm asking now." Victoria felt something hot and unfamiliar rise in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as anger, and another moment to realize the anger was covering something else, something that felt uncomfortably like abandonment, which was ridiculous. He was an employee. Employees were replaceable. She'd built an empire on that principle. "Fine," she said, her voice cold enough to frost the windows. "Take your night. But Marcus better be perfect, or this conversation continues Monday morning." Liam's expression didn't change, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you." "Don't." She turned away. "Just make sure everything's briefed properly." He left without another word. Victoria stood alone in her office, coat half on, staring at nothing. The hot feeling in her chest hadn't faded. She told herself it was just annoyance at a disrupted plan. Nothing more. She was very good at lying to herself. Marcus from legal turned out to be adequate. He was punctual, organized, and correctly anticipated her needs about 70% of the time, which was 70% less than Liam, but enough to function. The private jet took off at 6:15, 15 minutes behind schedule, because Sullivan couldn't find his reading glasses. Victoria sat in her usual seat, the Yamamoto contract spread across the table in front of her, trying not to notice the empty seat across from her where Liam usually sat. "Ms. Hale?" Marcus appeared at her elbow. "Would you like dinner before we go over the Silverton pitch?" "Just coffee, black." "Of course." He disappeared toward the galley. Through the window, the city lights fell away below them, replaced by the vast darkness of the eastern seaboard. 6 other investors and board members occupied the cabin, talking in low voices about market projections and stock positions. Victoria had spent her entire adult life in rooms like this. Expensive, exclusive, and emotionally sterile. She'd fought to get here, clawed her way up from nothing, building her company from a single patent into a tech empire worth billions. She'd sacrificed everything: sleep, relationships, anything that resembled a normal life. And she'd do it again. Success wasn't about happiness. It was about winning. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Play went great. Emma killed her solo. Thanks for understanding." Elsie. Victoria stared at the message. Liam had never texted her before. Their communication lived exclusively in emails and intercom messages and hallway briefings. This felt strangely intimate, seeing his words on her personal phone, knowing he was somewhere in the city watching his daughter on stage while Victoria flew toward another deal, another negotiation, another win that would feel empty by morning. She didn't respond. What would she say? Glad your daughter succeeded at something that means nothing in the real world? Instead, she deleted the message and returned to her contracts. Marcus brought coffee. It was the wrong temperature. "Ms. Hale?" Sullivan appeared beside her seat, his round face flushed with enthusiasm. "Mind if we discuss the blockchain integration before the pitch tomorrow?" Victoria pressed her fingers to her temple, feeling the headache already forming. Liam had been right. Liam was always right about things like this. 5 minutes, Sullivan, and it better be different from the last 2 pitches. It wasn't. The turbulence started 2 hours into the flight, somewhere over the Appalachian wilderness. Light at first. Just enough to make the cabin lights flicker and send ripples across Victoria's coffee. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reeves." The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom, professionally calm. "We're experiencing some unexpected weather. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Victoria barely looked up from her contracts. She'd flown through worse, but Marcus, settling into the seat across from her, looked pale. "Are you nervous about flying, Ms. Hale?" "No? Are you?" "A little." "Then distract yourself. Walk me through the Silverton financials." He did, and his voice steadied as he fell into familiar territory, discussing numbers and projections. Victoria half listened, making notes in the margins of her documents. Outside, the darkness was complete. No city lights this far into the wilderness, just black sky and blacker mountains below. The plane dropped, not turbulence dropped. Fell, like the air had been yanked out from under them. Papers flew. Marcus's briefcase hit the ceiling. Someone screamed. Then they caught again, the engines roaring as the pilot pulled them level. "Apologies, folks." Captain Reeves' voice had lost its casual tone. "We hit an air pocket. Everyone stay seated and—" The sentence died in a burst of static. The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in sick red. Victoria's hands gripped her armrests, knuckles white. Across from her, Marcus had gone from pale to gray. "What's happening?" someone shouted from the back. The plane shuddered. A grinding sound filled the cabin, metal on metal, something fundamental coming apart. Through the window, Victoria saw fire. Actual fire, streaming from the port engine. This was wrong. This was bad. This was... "Brace positions." The co-pilot's voice, high and terrified, cut through the intercom. "Brace, brace, brace." The world tilted. Victoria's stomach lurched as they started dropping again, but this time they didn't catch. The descent continued, steeper and faster. The grinding sound became a scream of tortured metal. More fire. The starboard engine now. Both engines dead or dying. Around her, people were panicking, crying, praying. Sullivan was clutching his seat, face buried in his hands. Marcus had his eyes closed, lips moving silently. Victoria couldn't look away from the window. They were falling into absolute darkness, and somewhere in that darkness was ground. Mountains. Trees, rock. Death. She'd spent 30 years building an empire, 30 years sacrificing everything for success, and she was going to die in a metal tube in the middle of nowhere, and all of it, the company, the money, the power, would mean exactly nothing. The thought that cut through her terror wasn't about her legacy or her empire. It was about the text message she'd deleted. Play went great. Emma killed her solo. A little girl she'd never met had performed on stage tonight, and her father had been there to watch because Victoria had let him go. And somehow that felt more real than anything in her briefcase. The trees came out of the darkness like fingers reaching up. Victoria saw them for maybe 3 seconds before impact. Then the world exploded into noise and pain and chaos. Victoria woke to smoke and silence. Her head throbbed. Something warm and wet ran down her face. Blood, probably. The world was tilted wrong, everything at an angle. Emergency lighting still glowed red, but dimmer now, failing. She was alive. The realization felt surreal, impossible. They'd hit the ground. She'd felt the impact, the horrible crunch of metal folding like paper. She should be dead. "Hello?" Her voice came out hoarse, barely audible over the settling creaks of destroyed aircraft. "Can anyone hear me?" Groaning, somewhere in front of her. Victoria tried to move and gasped as pain shot through her left side. Ribs, definitely ribs. She forced herself to breathe through it, to focus. "Who's there?" she called. "Miss Hale?" "Marcus." He sounded close, but she couldn't see him in the red dimness and smoke. "I'm here," she managed. "Are you hurt?" I can't feel my legs." The fear in his voice was naked, childlike. Victoria tried to unbuckle her seatbelt with shaking hands. The mechanism was jammed. She yanked harder, ignoring the pain in her ribs, and finally it released. Standing was harder. Everything hurt. But she forced herself up, gripping the seatbacks for support. The cabin floor was tilted at a 30-degree angle, nose down. Smoke hung in the air, thick enough to taste. "Marcus, keep talking. I'll find you. I'm scared." "I know. Keep talking." She made her way forward past empty seats. Most were empty. Some weren't. Victoria didn't let herself look too closely at the ones that weren't empty, at the impossible angles and the stillness. Focus. Find the living. Deal with the dead later. Marcus was pinned under a collapsed overhead compartment, his legs trapped beneath twisted metal. His face was white, shocky. Blood soaked his shirt from a gash across his shoulder. "Oh God," he whispered. "I can't move. I can't." "Stop." Victoria knelt beside him, her own pain forgotten. "Look at me. You're in shock. I need you to breathe. Can you do that?" "My legs." "I know, but right now breathe." In through your nose, out through your mouth. Tried. Failed. Hyperventilated instead. Victoria did something she never did. She took his hand, held it firmly, grounding him with physical contact. Marcus, listen to my voice. You're alive. That's what matters right now. In through your nose. She breathed with him, counting him through it until his panic subsided into something manageable. Around them, the aircraft settled and creaked. The smoke was getting thicker. We need to get you out, she said. I can't move it. His voice broke. I tried. It's too heavy. Victoria examined the collapsed compartment. He was right. It had to weigh 200 pounds, and it was wedged against the seat frame. She couldn't lift it alone, not with her ribs screaming and her head still fuzzy from impact. Stay here, she said. Where are you going? To find help. She made her way deeper into the cabin, past more empty seats. The plane had broken apart on impact. She could see night sky through a jagged tear in the fuselage about halfway back. Most of the rear section was just gone, sheared clean off. The passengers who'd been sitting back there. Don't think about it. Keep moving. She found Sullivan near the emergency exit, unconscious but breathing. A knot the size of an egg swelled on his forehead. She checked his pulse, steady, and kept searching. The cockpit door hung open, and Victoria made herself look inside. Captain Reeves and the co-pilot were still strapped in their seats. Neither was moving. Neither would move again. Victoria backed away, bile rising in her throat. She'd fired people without blinking. She'd destroyed careers and crushed competitors, and built her empire on calculated ruthlessness. But this was different. This was death, immediate and undeniable, and it made her feel small and helpless and terrified. Ms. Hale? The voice came from behind her, weak but familiar. Victoria spun around. Who's there? It's back here. I'm stuck. She followed the voice to the tear in the fuselage. And there, half hanging out of the aircraft, one leg caught in the twisted metal, was Liam Carter. Victoria's mind went blank with shock. Liam? Hey. He tried to smile, failed. Blood ran down his face from a cut above his eye. Surprise. What are you... You're supposed to be in New York, the play. Emma's play was at 6. I made it, saw her solo, took her for ice cream after, dropped her at my sister's place by 9. He winced, trying to shift his trapped leg. Made it to the airport by 10, convinced the gate agent to let me on at the last minute. Figured I could still make the retreat, keep my job, be the reliable assistant you needed. Victoria just stared at him. You came back? Yeah, well, another failed smile. Turns out that was a terrible decision. The absurdity of it hit her all at once. He'd kept his promise to his daughter and still tried to make it to the retreat. He'd probably rushed through the airport, run to the gate, boarded at the last possible second. All to do his job. All to be there for her. And now he was trapped in a destroyed aircraft in the middle of nowhere because of it. Your leg, she said, kneeling beside him. Can you feel it? Unfortunately, yes. Hurts like hell, which I guess means it's not broken. Just stuck. He looked at her more closely, his expression shifting to concern. You're bleeding. Head wound, it's nothing. Victoria Ms. Hale, she corrected automatically. Even now, even here, the walls stayed up. Liam actually laughed, though it came out pained. Right. Formal titles while bleeding in a crashed plane. Very professional. She found herself almost smiling back. Then reality crashed back in. Marcus is trapped. Sullivan's unconscious. The pilots are dead? Victoria nodded. Liam processed this, his face going grim. Anyone else? I don't know. I haven't checked the whole cabin. The back section is gone. Richardson and Davies were sitting back there. Liam closed his eyes briefly. Okay, first things first. We need to get out of this plane before something catches fire or the fuel ignites. You're trapped. I know. But you're not. Check on everyone else. See who can walk, then come back and we'll figure out my leg. Victoria wanted to argue, but he was right. She nodded and stood, every muscle protesting. Victoria? Liam's voice stopped her. Be careful. The way he said her name, no formality, no distance, just genuine concern, did something strange to her chest. She pushed the feeling away and went back to work. Sullivan was coming around when she reached him, groaning and touching his head gingerly. What happened? We crashed. Can you walk? He tried to stand, swayed, caught himself against a seat. I think so. Everything's spinning. Concussion. Stay close to me. Together they made their way through the cabin. They found 3 more survivors. Chen from accounting, who had a broken arm but was otherwise functional. Patricia from investor relations, shaken but unhurt. And one of the flight attendants, a young woman named Kelly, who was crying quietly in her jump seat, staring at nothing. Victoria counted. 8 people alive out of 14 on board. Nearly half the passengers dead. The number felt unreal. We need to get outside, she told the group. The plane's not stable. Liam's trapped near the emergency exit. We're going to need to work together to free him, then get clear of the wreckage. Liam's here? Patricia looked shocked. I thought he wasn't coming. Change of plans, Victoria said shortly. Chen, can you manage with that arm? I'll manage. Good. Sullivan, stay with Kelly. Keep her talking. Keep her moving. Patricia, check for emergency supplies, first aid kit, blankets, anything useful. I'm going back for Liam. They scattered to their tasks, and Victoria returned to the torn fuselage. Liam was exactly where she'd left him, still trapped, still conscious, still somehow calm despite everything. Everyone accounted for? He asked. 8 alive, including us. 6 dead. He absorbed that with a slight nod. Could have been worse. Could have been better. True. He looked at his trapped leg. Okay, here's the problem. The metal's pinning me against the seat frame. If we can pry it up even a few inches, I can pull free. Victoria examined the twisted metal. It was wedged tight, cutting into his calf, probably through the skin. Moving it was going to hurt. This is going to hurt, she said. Yeah, I figured. The others arrived, Sullivan and Patricia supporting a shaky Kelly between them, Chen cradling his broken arm. Together, they positioned themselves around the metal, finding handholds. On 3, Victoria said. 1, 2, 3. They pulled. The metal groaned but didn't budge. Again, Liam said through gritted teeth. Harder. You're going to... I know what I'm going to do. Pull. They pulled. The metal shifted an inch, cutting deeper before rising. Liam made a sound he tried to suppress, something between a gasp and a scream. Don't stop, he managed. Keep going. One more pull. The metal lifted enough. Liam yanked his leg free and collapsed onto the tilted floor, breathing hard. Blood soaked through his torn pants, dark and spreading. Victoria dropped beside him immediately. Let me see. It's fine. Liam. He met her eyes, and whatever he saw there made him stop arguing. He let her roll up his pant leg, revealing a deep gash across his calf, bleeding but not arterial. Bad, but survivable if they could stop the bleeding. Patricia appeared with a first aid kit. Found this in the galley. Victoria took it, pulling out gauze and medical tape with hands that were surprisingly steady. She'd never done this before. Her world was boardrooms and balance sheets, not blood and bandages. But she'd watched enough medical dramas to understand the basics. She pressed gauze against the wound. Liam tensed, but didn't pull away. You're going to need stitches, she said. Add it to the list. He tried to sit up, winced, tried again. We need to move. Get clear of the plane. He was right. The smell of fuel was getting stronger, mixing with the smoke. They needed to get outside, get distance between themselves and the wreckage before something sparked. Victoria helped Liam stand, taking his weight when his injured leg tried to buckle. He was heavier than he looked, solid muscle under that ill-fitting suit. Together they made their way to the tear in the fuselage. Outside was cold and dark and utterly quiet. They'd crashed into a forest. That much was clear. Trees surrounded them, tall shadows against the slightly less dark sky. The plane had carved a path through them, leaving broken timber and scattered metal in its wake. No lights anywhere. No sounds of rescue. Just wilderness and silence. One by one, the survivors climbed out of the wreckage. Victoria went last, helping Kelly down before lowering herself to the forest floor. Her ribs screamed in protest. She ignored them. How far should we get? Sullivan asked, his voice small in the darkness. Far enough that we're not inside the blast radius if this thing explodes, Liam said. He was leaning heavily against a tree, his bandaged leg unable to hold his full weight. 100 yards at least. They moved slowly, helping each other over the rough terrain. Chen with his broken arm. Kelly still in shock. Victoria with her ribs. Liam with his leg. Sullivan with his concussion. Patricia was the only one relatively uninjured, and she took the lead, using her phone's flashlight to guide them away from the wreck. When they'd gone far enough, they stopped in a small clearing. Behind them, the wrecked plane sat like a broken toy, its emergency lights still glowing faintly red. "Now what?" Chen asked. Everyone looked at Victoria. She was the CEO, the leader, the one who made decisions. They expected her to have answers. She had none. "Now we wait," she said, projecting confidence she didn't feel. The plane had a transponder. The flight plan was filed. When we don't arrive at the retreat, they'll start searching. "How long?" Kelly whispered. "Hours? Maybe a day. Maybe longer. Maybe never." They were in the middle of nowhere, and the crash had sheared off the tail section. If the transponder had been in the tail... Don't think about that. Project Confidence. That's what leaders do. "We should make a shelter," Liam said quietly. He'd lowered himself to the ground, back against a tree, his injured legs stretched out in front of him. "It's getting colder. We need to stay warm, stay together, stay visible." Victoria looked at him. Even injured, even exhausted, he was thinking practically, planning ahead, being useful. She'd never appreciated him before. Not really. He'd just been the assistant, the person who kept her schedule running, a tool she used to manage her empire. Now he might be the only reason they survived this. "Sullivan, Patricia, Chen," she said, falling back into command mode because it was all she knew. "Gather anything useful from the plane. Blankets, seat cushions, anything we can use for shelter or warmth. Kelly, stay here with me and Liam. We'll set up a base camp." They scattered, grateful to have tasks. Victoria sat down beside Liam, her ribs protesting the movement. "You okay?" he asked. "Broken ribs, I think. You?" "Leg hurts like hell, but I'll live." He paused. "That was good leadership back there." "I don't feel like a leader. I feel like I'm making this up as I go." "That's what leadership is." Liam looked at her, and in the dim light, his eyes were kind. "You think I knew what I was doing when Emma was born, and her mother walked out 2 weeks later? I just did the next thing, then the next, then the next. Eventually, you've made it through the day." Victoria had never heard him talk about his personal life before. She'd never asked. "How old is Emma?" 7, smart as hell, stubborn as her dad, and way too good at guilt trips. A small smile touched his face despite the pain. "She made me promise I'd see her play. I told her I couldn't, that work was too important. She said, Daddy, I'm only going to be 7 once. Your work will still be there tomorrow." She was right. "Yeah." Liam shifted, trying to find a more comfortable position. "Kids have a way of cutting through the bullshit, you know? All the things we tell ourselves are important. She just sees what matters." What matters? Victoria had built her entire life around things that mattered. Market share, profit margins, quarterly reports. Concrete, measurable, real. Except sitting here in the darkness, bleeding and cold and possibly dying in the wilderness, none of it felt real at all. What felt real was Liam's steady presence beside her. The other survivors working together, the simple fact of being alive. "I deleted your text," she said suddenly. Liam looked at her. "What?" "Earlier. You texted me about Emma's play. I deleted it." "Okay. I'm sorry." He was quiet for a moment, then, "Why are you telling me this?" Victoria didn't have an answer. Or maybe she did, but it was too raw, too honest for who she'd spent 30 years becoming. Before she could figure out what to say, Sullivan came crashing back through the trees, his face pale even in the darkness. "The plane," he gasped. "There's smoke coming from the front section. Real smoke, not just dust. I think something's burning." They all turned to look. He was right. Smoke, darker than before, rising from the crumpled cockpit. "Everyone away from it," Liam said immediately. "Now!" They scrambled back, putting more distance between themselves and the wreckage. Victoria helped Liam up, and this time he didn't protest, just leaned on her and moved as fast as his injured leg allowed. They'd made it maybe 50 yards when the plane exploded. The sound was enormous, physical, a pressure wave that knocked them all flat. Heat washed over them, fierce and sudden. Victoria hit the ground hard, Liam falling beside her, and for a few seconds she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the raw terror of being too close to death again. When she could finally look up, the wreckage was engulfed in flames. 30 feet high, maybe more, turning night into day. Everything they might have salvaged from the plane was gone now, consumed by fire. "Is everyone okay?" Patricia's voice shaky but functional, a chorus of responses. Everyone had made it clear. Everyone was alive. Victoria looked at Liam. He was staring at the burning wreckage, his expression unreadable in the firelight. "That was close," he said quietly. "Too close. If they'd been inside, if they'd waited even 5 more minutes." Victoria's hands were shaking. She pressed them against the ground, trying to stop the tremors. This was too much. The crash, the deaths, the explosion. She was a CEO, not a survivor. She controlled boardrooms, not life and death situations. "Hey." Liam's hand covered hers, warm and steady. "We made it. We're okay. 6 people are dead." "I know. We could have died. But we didn't." His certainty should have annoyed her. Instead, it anchored her. Victoria looked at him, really looked, maybe for the first time in 3 years. He was bleeding, injured, probably in serious pain, but his eyes were calm, focused, present. "How are you so steady?" she asked. "Practice." A sad smile. "Single dad, remember? When your kid is screaming at 2 a.m. and you haven't slept in 30 hours, and you don't know if you're doing anything right, you learn to be steady, because if you fall apart, who's going to take care of her?" Something in Victoria's chest cracked open, a feeling she'd spent decades building walls against. Vulnerability. Need. The terrifying understanding that she couldn't control this, couldn't win through strategy or ruthlessness, couldn't do this alone. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Neither do I." Liam squeezed her hand gently. "But we'll figure it out, one step at a time." The flames burned higher, consuming what was left of their old lives. And in the wilderness, surrounded by people who depended on her, holding the hand of a man she'd never really seen before tonight, Victoria Hale realized something that should have terrified her. She wasn't alone anymore. Whether she wanted it or not, everything had changed. The fire burned through the night, a beacon that should have brought rescue, but instead only lit their faces with flickering orange light. Victoria sat against a tree trunk, hugging her knees to her chest, watching the flames consume what was left of the aircraft. Every breath hurt. Her ribs felt like broken glass shifting inside her chest. "You should try to sleep," Liam said beside her. He'd been quiet for the past hour, conserving energy, but his eyes never closed. "Can't." "Yeah, me neither." Around them, the others had collapsed into exhausted sleep. Sullivan curled on his side, Patricia with her jacket over her face, Chen propped awkwardly against a tree to keep weight off his broken arm. Only Kelly remained awake, staring at the fire with empty eyes. Victoria watched the flight attendant with growing concern. "She hasn't spoken in hours." "Shock," Liam said quietly. "She'll come out of it or she won't. We just need to keep her warm and safe until she does." The casual way he said it made Victoria's stomach turn. Until she does. As if there was a real possibility she wouldn't, as if people could just break and stay broken. "Have you seen this before?" Victoria asked. "What, plane crashes?" "No. But I've seen people shut down when things get too hard. My ex-wife did it after Emma was born. Just went somewhere inside herself where I couldn't reach her." He shifted his injured leg, wincing. 2 weeks of silence, then she packed a bag and left. Haven't heard from her since. Victoria had no idea what to say to that. In her world, people didn't just leave. They signed non-compete agreements and negotiated severance packages and sent passive-aggressive emails through lawyers. "That must have been hard," she finally managed. Liam laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Hard doesn't cover it. I had a 2-week-old baby, no idea what I was doing, and a job that barely paid enough for daycare. I used to sit on the bathroom floor at 3 in the morning while Emma screamed, just thinking about how easy it would be to walk away too." "But you didn't." "No." He looked at her and the firelight caught in his eyes. "Because she needed me, and sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that has to be enough." The words settled between them, heavy with meaning Victoria couldn't quite name. She'd spent her entire adult life being needed by her company, her investors, her board. But it wasn't the same. Companies didn't cry at 3 a.m. They didn't need you to stay when things got hard. They just needed you to perform. "I've never been needed like that," she said, surprising herself with the admission. "Sure you have. People depend on you." "It's not the same." If I disappeared tomorrow, the company would replace me. The stock might dip for a quarter, but they'd recover. Everything I've built would continue without me. Liam was quiet for a moment. That's a lonely way to think about your life. It was. Victoria had never let herself acknowledge it before, but sitting here in the darkness with death still fresh in her mind, the loneliness felt crushing. 30 years old, billions in the bank, and nobody who would sit on a bathroom floor at 3 a.m. for her. I'm not good at needing people, she said. I noticed. Despite everything, she almost smiled. That obvious? Victoria, you apologized for deleting a text message. That's probably the most vulnerable thing you've done in 3 years. He paused. And you called me Liam, not my assistant or Mr. Carter. Just Liam. She had. The realization felt strange. The walls she'd built so carefully were cracking, and she didn't know how to repair them, didn't know if she wanted to. The fire popped loudly, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. In the brief flare of light, Victoria saw how pale Liam looked, how heavily he was breathing. His bandage was soaked through with blood, dark and spreading. Your leg's still bleeding, she said. I know. We need to change the bandage. In the morning, save the supplies. Liam, Victoria. He met her eyes. We have maybe 3 days' worth of first aid supplies for 8 people in the wilderness with no idea when rescue is coming. We need to ration everything, including medical care. My leg can wait until sunrise. He was right, and she hated it. Hated the practical calculus of survival, the cold math of who got treatment and when. In her world, you threw money at problems until they disappeared. Here, money meant nothing. Resources were finite, and every choice mattered. Fine, she said, but at sunrise, I'm changing it whether you argue or not. Deal. They sat in silence for a while. The fire died down slowly, the heat fading until Victoria could feel the cold creeping back in. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, trying to conserve warmth. Without a word, Liam shifted closer and draped his jacket over her shoulders. It smelled like smoke and blood and him, something she'd never noticed before in the sterile environment of the office. You need this more than I do, she protested. I'm bigger. More body mass, basic thermodynamics. He leaned back against the tree, his shoulder touching hers. Besides, if you freeze to death, who's going to boss me around tomorrow? Victoria wanted to argue, but the warmth from his jacket and the solid presence of him beside her felt too good to reject. So instead, she did something completely foreign to her nature. She let someone take care of her. Thank you, she said quietly. You're welcome. Dawn came slowly, gray light filtering through the trees and revealing the full scope of their situation. The plane had carved a 100-yard scar through the forest, leaving twisted metal and shattered trees in its wake. The tail section was completely gone, probably scattered across miles of wilderness. What remained was a burned-out shell, still smoking in the morning light. Victoria stood carefully, her ribs protesting every movement. Around her, the other survivors were waking, groaning, stretching, assessing their injuries in the unforgiving daylight. Jesus, Sullivan whispered, staring at the wreckage. We were in that thing. And we got out, Patricia said firmly. That's what matters. But Chen was looking at the sky, his face troubled. I don't hear anything. He was right. No helicopters, no search planes, no sounds of rescue, just birds and wind, and the eerie quiet of deep wilderness. They're looking for us, Victoria said with more confidence than she felt. The flight plan was filed. They know we're out here. But do they know where? Chen asked. Nobody had an answer for that. Victoria turned to find Liam trying to stand, using a broken branch as a makeshift crutch. His face was pale, drawn with pain. The bandage on his leg was completely soaked through now, dark red bleeding into brown. Sit down, she ordered. We need to assess the situation. Sit. Down. She used her boardroom voice, the one that made executives twice her age flinch. You're no good to anyone if you pass out from blood loss. Liam sat. Victoria knelt beside him and began unwrapping the sodden bandage. The wound underneath made her stomach turn. The gash was deep, edges ragged, and definitely infected if the red streaks radiating from it meant anything. This is bad, she said. I know. It needs to be cleaned, properly. With what? We don't have running water, and I wouldn't trust the water around here without boiling it first. He was right again. Victoria looked around their makeshift camp. 8 injured people, minimal supplies, surrounded by miles of empty forest. The enormity of their situation hit her fully for the first time. This wasn't a problem she could delegate or a crisis she could manage with the right phone call. This was survival, raw and immediate. "Okay," she said, forcing herself to think. "We need water, shelter, and a signal. In that order." "There was a stream," Kelly said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her, the first words she'd spoken since the crash. Her voice was hoarse but functional. "I saw it from the plane, right before we hit. Maybe a quarter-mile north." "You sure?" Liam asked gently. "I'm sure. I was looking out the window, watching the trees, and I saw water, moonlight reflecting off it." Victoria felt something like hope stir in her chest. "That's good. That's really good. Patricia, Sullivan, you two are the least injured. Can you search for it?" They nodded and headed off into the trees. "Chen, see what you can salvage from the wreckage. Anything that didn't burn, metal, plastic, anything useful." She turned to Kelly. "Can you help him?" The flight attendant nodded slowly. That left Victoria and Liam alone. She finished cleaning his wound as best she could with the remaining supplies, using precious bottled water from the first aid kit to flush out the dirt. Liam gritted his teeth but didn't complain. "You're good at this," he said when she'd finished rewrapping the leg. "At what?" "Leading, making decisions, keeping everyone focused." Victoria sat back on her heels. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." "That's what leadership is." Liam looked at her seriously. "Most people freeze when things go wrong. They wait for someone else to fix it, but you just step up, take charge. It's impressive." She didn't feel impressive. She felt terrified and out of her depth and completely unprepared for any of this. But she couldn't say that, couldn't show weakness when everyone was counting on her to have answers. "I don't know what I'm doing," she admitted quietly. "Nobody does. That's the secret they don't teach you in business school." Liam leaned back against the tree, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "You just make the best call you can with the information you have, then deal with the consequences." It was the most honest assessment of leadership Victoria had ever heard. Better than any management book, any executive seminar. Just the raw truth that everyone was making it up as they went along. Patricia and Sullivan returned an hour later with good news. They'd found the stream, cold, clear, and running fast over rocks. Victoria organized a water run, sending everyone who could walk to fill any containers they'd salvaged from the wreckage. By midday they had water, a small pile of useful debris from the plane, and the beginnings of an actual shelter. Chen had found a tarp that hadn't burned, and they'd strung it between trees to create a lean-to that could fit all 8 of them if they crowded. Victoria worked alongside everyone else, ignoring the pain in her ribs, ignoring her exhaustion. She'd never done manual labor before. Her hands blistered within an hour. She didn't care. Keeping busy meant not thinking about rescue that wasn't coming, about the dead passengers, about how quickly her carefully controlled life had disintegrated. "Take a break," Liam said from his position under a tree. He'd been relegated to sitting after trying to help and nearly passing out. "You're going to hurt yourself." "I'm fine." "You're limping." She was. Victoria hadn't noticed. She sat down heavily beside him, her whole body aching. "How's the leg?" she asked. "Hurts, but the bleeding stopped." He studied her face. "You look terrible." "Thanks." "I mean it. When did you last sleep?" Victoria tried to remember. Before the flight? That had been yesterday afternoon, but it felt like weeks ago. "I don't know." "You need to rest. Let the others finish the shelter." "They need me. They need you functional, which you won't be if you collapse from exhaustion." Liam's voice was gentle but firm. "That's an order from your assistant." Despite everything, Victoria laughed. It came out harsh and slightly hysterical. "You're ordering me around? Someone has to. You are terrible at taking care of yourself." He wasn't wrong. Victoria had spent so long taking care of her company, her investors, her bottom line, that she'd forgotten how to take care of herself. Or maybe she'd never learned in the first place. She leaned back against the tree beside Liam, letting her eyes close. Just for a minute, just to rest. She woke to darkness and panic. For a disoriented moment, Victoria didn't know where she was. Then it all came flooding back, the crash, the fire, the wilderness. She'd fallen asleep against the tree and slept through the entire afternoon. Hey, you're okay. Liam's voice, close and calm. Just breathe. She was breathing too fast, hyperventilating. Liam's hand found hers in the darkness, grounding her. That's it. Slow down. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Victoria focused on his voice, on the solid warmth of his hand, on the rhythm of breathing. Slowly, the panic receded. What time is it? She managed. Around 8. You slept for 6 hours. Why didn't you wake me? Because you needed sleep. He shifted beside her. The others finished the shelter. We've got a fire going. Everyone's accounted for. Victoria looked around. Sure enough, a small fire burned in a ring of stones, and the tarp shelter stood completed. Everyone huddled underneath it. Someone had laid out seat cushions as makeshift bedding. You should have woken me, she said, but there was no heat in it. Probably. But I made an executive decision. The irony in his voice was clear. Besides, you talk in your sleep. It was entertaining. Victoria's face heated. I do not. You absolutely do. Something about quarterly reports and disappointing Sullivan. Even unconscious, you're running the company. She wanted to be embarrassed, but instead found herself almost smiling. That sounds about right. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The fire crackled softly. From the shelter, someone was snoring, probably Sullivan, from the sound of it. No rescue today, Victoria said quietly. No. What if they don't find us? Liam was quiet for a long moment. Then we survive until they do. We've got water, shelter, each other. That's more than some people start with. His optimism should have annoyed her. Instead, it steadied her. Liam had lived through his wife abandoning him with a newborn. He'd survived single parenthood on an assistant's salary. He knew about enduring impossible situations. Tell me about Emma, Victoria said suddenly. Liam looked surprised. What do you want to know? Anything. Everything. I realized I've worked with you for 3 years and never asked. He was quiet, maybe deciding if he wanted to share. Then, she's 7, like I said. 2nd grade, obsessed with dinosaurs and space and anything she's not supposed to touch. She asks about 1,000 questions a day, most of which I can't answer. His voice softened. She's the best thing I've ever done. The only thing I'm sure I got right. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She gave me a reason to keep going when everything else fell apart. He paused. You remind me of her sometimes. Victoria blinked. Your 7-year-old daughter? Hear me out. Emma never takes no for an answer. She's stubborn as hell, smarter than she should be, and completely convinced she can do anything if she tries hard enough. Sound familiar? It did, uncomfortably so. I'm not sure if that's a compliment. It is. Those qualities drive me crazy in a 2nd grader, but in a CEO, they're pretty impressive. Something warm bloomed in Victoria's chest. She'd been praised before, investors lauding her vision, magazines celebrating her success. But this felt different, more personal. Like Liam saw her, really saw her, not just what she'd accomplished. I wish I'd asked about her before, Victoria said. About you. I wish I'd actually known the person who kept my life running. You were focused on the company. That's your job. No, that's my excuse. There's a difference. She looked at him in the firelight. I built walls to keep everyone out, and I told myself it was professional. But really, I was just scared. Of what? Of this. Of needing someone. Of letting anyone close enough to matter. The words came easier in the darkness, like confession. My parents died when I was 19. Car accident. After that, I just shut down. Threw myself into building the company because it was safer than caring about people who could leave. Liam's hand tightened around hers. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. Doesn't make it hurt less. He was right. Victoria had spent 11 years pretending the loss didn't matter, that she'd moved past it. But the wound was still there, underneath all her success and ambition. Is that why you never married? Liam asked gently. Never got close to anyone? Probably. Easier to control a company than a relationship. She laughed bitterly. Turns out I can't control either. The plane crash kind of proved that. Nobody can control everything. That's what makes life terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Victoria had never thought of life as beautiful. Challenging, yes. Competitive, definitely. But beautiful? That required an optimism she'd lost somewhere along the way. How do you do it? She asked. Stay positive when everything's falling apart? I don't. Not really. Liam shifted, trying to find a more comfortable position for his injured leg. I fake it for Emma. Put on a smile, tell her everything's okay, then cry in the shower after she goes to bed. But faking it enough times, eventually it becomes real, or real enough to survive on. The honesty of it struck Victoria. He wasn't some naturally optimistic person who sailed through life. He was just someone who kept going because he had to, because someone needed him to. She understood that. She'd kept going after her parents died because the company needed her. But the company was just numbers and projections. Emma was a real person who needed her father. The difference felt massive. Do you think she knows, Victoria asked, that you're missing? Liam's face tightened with pain that had nothing to do with his leg. My sister will have told her by now. The retreat organizers would have reported the plane missing when we didn't arrive. Emma knows. His voice cracked slightly. She's probably terrified. We'll get back to her. We'll get home. You sound sure. I have to be. If I let myself believe we won't make it. She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Yeah, Liam said quietly. I know. They sat together in the darkness, holding hands like children afraid of the dark. And maybe they were. Maybe everyone was just a scared kid pretending to be an adult, faking confidence until it became real enough to survive on. The fire burned low, and eventually they moved to the shelter where the others slept. Victoria lay on a seat cushion that smelled like smoke and jet fuel, Liam beside her, their shoulders touching in the cramped space. Victoria? Liam's voice was barely a whisper. Thank you. For what? For letting me see Emma's play. For understanding. I know it messed up your retreat plans. Liam, you got on the plane. You came back because you thought I needed you. Did you? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Did she need him? The competent assistant who kept her schedule running? Yes, but that wasn't what he was asking. I'm starting to think I did, Victoria whispered. I just didn't know it yet. Liam's hand found hers again in the darkness. And for the first time in 11 years, Victoria let herself need someone. She fell asleep holding his hand, and for once, she didn't dream about quarterly reports or disappointing Sullivan. She dreamed about a little girl named Emma, waiting for her father to come home. Morning brought rain. It started as a light drizzle that quickly became a downpour, hammering against the tarp and turning the ground to mud. Victoria woke to water dripping on her face, and Liam already awake beside her, staring at the leaking shelter with grim determination. We need to reinforce this, he said. The tarp's not waterproof enough. They spent the morning in the rain, all of them, trying to patch holes with plastic sheeting salvaged from the wreckage and digging trenches to divert water away from their shelter. Victoria's hands, already blistered from yesterday, started bleeding. She wrapped them in torn fabric and kept working. By noon, they'd managed to create something approximating weatherproof shelter. But everyone was soaked, shivering, and exhausted. We need to stay dry, Chen said through chattering teeth. Hypothermia is a real risk. The fire's out, Patricia added miserably. Everything's too wet to relight. Victoria looked at their small group, at the misery and fear in their faces, and felt her leadership resolve wavering. What did she know about surviving in the wilderness? She was a CEO, not an outdoors expert. She made business decisions, not life or death choices. We'll huddle together for warmth, Liam said, taking charge when Victoria couldn't. Everyone in the shelter, as close as we can get. Share body heat. It's not comfortable, but it'll keep us alive. They crowded into the shelter, 8 people pressed together like refugees, which, Victoria supposed, they were. The rain continued, relentless and cold. Hours passed. Victoria drifted in and out of awareness, her body aching, her mind foggy with exhaustion and pain. Somewhere in the misery, she felt Liam's arm around her shoulders, his warmth the only thing keeping the cold at bay. Stay with me, he murmured. Don't check out. I'm here. Good. Because I need you. We all need you. The words cut through the fog. Need. That word again. It terrified and sustained her in equal measure. The rain stopped at sunset, leaving everything dripping and miserable. They managed to get a small fire going with the driest wood they could find, more smoke than flame, but enough to take the edge off the cold. We've been here 2 days, Sullivan said, his voice hollow. 2 days and no rescue. They're looking, Victoria insisted. Are they? We crashed in the middle of nowhere. The transponder probably got destroyed. They might not even know where to search. They know our flight path. They'll search the route. That's hundreds of miles of wilderness. Sullivan, Patricia started, we're going to die out here. His voice rose, edging toward panic. All of us. We're going to die and nobody's even going to find our bodies. Stop it, Victoria said sharply. That kind of talk doesn't help anyone. It's the truth. The truth is we're alive right now. In this moment, we're alive. And we're going to stay that way by working together and not giving up. She met his eyes, forcing steel into her voice. I didn't survive a plane crash to die of negativity. So either get it together or shut up. Sullivan stared at her, then looked away, chastened. The silence that followed was heavy but necessary. Victoria had never spoken to a board member like that before. But they weren't in a boardroom anymore. Different rules applied here. She's right, Liam said quietly. Falling apart doesn't help. We stick together, we stay focused, we survive. That's the only option. One by one, the others nodded. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep despite her exhaustion. She lay under the tarp, listening to the others breathe, feeling the weight of their lives on her shoulders. 8 people depending on her to make the right calls, to lead them through this. She'd led a company through hostile takeovers and market crashes. But this was different. This was immediate and personal and terrifying in a way balance sheets never were. You're thinking too loud, Liam whispered beside her. Can't help it. Try. She turned to face him in the darkness. What if I make the wrong choice? What if I get someone killed? Then you get someone killed. But at least you tried. At least you didn't freeze and do nothing. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be. It's just true. He reached out, his hand finding her face in the darkness, fingers gentle against her cheek. You're doing everything right, Victoria. You're keeping people alive. That's all that matters. His touch sent electricity through her, warm and grounding and completely inappropriate given their situation. But Victoria didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into it, letting herself take comfort from another human being for the first time in years. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. You don't seem scared. I'm good at hiding it. Years of practice. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. But I am. I'm terrified. For us, for Emma, for all of it. The admission made him more real, more human. Not the steady assistant who always had answers, but a man who was just as lost as she was. Liam. Yeah? Victoria didn't know what she'd been about to say. Thank you, I need you, don't let go. All of it seemed too much and not enough. So instead she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was brief, barely more than a brush of lips, but it felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating at once. Liam pulled back slightly, his breath warm against her face. Victoria, don't. Don't analyze it or tell me all the reasons it's a bad idea. I know them all already. She kept her voice low so the others wouldn't hear. I needed to do that just once. Just once, he repeated softly. Then he kissed her back. This time it wasn't brief. This time it was deep and desperate and full of all the fear and need they'd been holding back. Victoria's hands tangled in his hair, his arms wrapped around her, and for a few stolen moments in the darkness, the world disappeared. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, reality came crashing back. That was a mistake, Victoria said. Probably. We can't do that again. Probably not. I'm your boss. Technically, you might not have a company to come back to if we don't get rescued soon. The dark humor of it made her laugh, quiet and slightly unhinged. So this is what it takes? A plane crash in the wilderness for me to finally see you? Apparently. Liam's smile was visible even in the darkness. Terrible timing, as usual. The worst. But neither of them moved away. They stayed close, foreheads touching, breathing each other's air. We should sleep, Liam said eventually. We should. They didn't. They stayed awake in the darkness, holding each other, silently acknowledging that everything had changed and nothing could ever be the same. And somewhere in the wilderness, the rain started again. Morning came with guilt. Victoria woke to gray light filtering through the tarp, and the awareness of Liam's arm still draped across her waist. Around them, the others were beginning to stir, and she carefully extracted herself from his embrace before anyone could notice how close they'd been sleeping. Liam's eyes opened, meeting hers. Neither spoke. What was there to say? They'd crossed a line in the darkness, and now daylight made everything complicated again. She moved to the shelter's edge and looked out at another wet, miserable day. Everything dripped. The forest floor had turned to mud. Their meager supplies were scattered and damp. "We need food," Chen said, joining her. His broken arm was splinted with branches and torn fabric, but the swelling had gone down. "Water's fine, but we can't survive on that alone." He was right. They'd been rationing the few protein bars and snacks salvaged from the plane, but those were nearly gone. Victoria's stomach had been hollow and aching for days. "Any ideas?" she asked. "The stream probably has fish, and there might be berries or edible plants, but I don't know enough about wilderness survival to know what's safe." Neither did Victoria. Her expertise ended at reading quarterly reports and negotiating contracts. She turned back to find Liam sitting up, testing his injured leg carefully. "How is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Better. The infection's not spreading." He looked at her, and something unspoken passed between them. "We need to talk about yesterday." "Not now." Victoria glanced at the others. "Later." "When's later? We're stuck here together." "I don't know, Liam. Just not now." Before he could respond, Sullivan emerged from the shelter, his face drawn and pale. "I heard something last night. During the rain." Everyone went still. "What kind of something?" Patricia asked. "Movement. In the trees, something big." "Probably just a deer," Chen said, but he didn't sound convinced. "It wasn't a deer, it was following us. I could hear it circling the shelter." Victoria felt ice slide down her spine. They were in the middle of wilderness, miles from civilization. Of course there would be animals, bears maybe, mountain lions, things that saw injured humans as easy prey. "Did anyone else hear it?" she asked. Heads shook, but that didn't mean Sullivan was wrong. He'd been on watch while the others slept. "We need weapons," Liam said. "Something more than sticks. If there's a predator out there, we need to be able to defend ourselves." "With what?" Sullivan's voice climbed toward hysteria again. "We don't have guns or knives or anything useful." "Then we make something." Liam struggled to his feet using his makeshift crutch. "Sharp rocks, sturdy branches. Anything's better than nothing." They spent the morning fashioning crude weapons from debris and branches, sharpening stones against other stones until they had edges that could cut. It was primitive and probably useless against anything seriously dangerous, but the act of preparing gave them purpose. Victoria worked alongside the others, her hands raw and bleeding from the rough work. She caught Liam watching her several times, his expression unreadable. Every time their eyes met, she looked away first. The kiss had been a mistake, a moment of weakness brought on by fear and exhaustion. It couldn't happen again. She was his boss, and even if they weren't in the office anymore, the power dynamic made anything between them inappropriate, except she couldn't stop thinking about it, about the way he'd held her, the desperate need in his kiss, the feeling of being wanted for herself instead of what she could provide. "You're bleeding again," Patricia said, nodding at Victoria's hands. She looked down. Her palms were torn open from gripping rough stones, blood mixing with dirt. She hadn't even noticed. "I'm fine." "You're not. None of us are." Patricia sat down beside her, her own hand showing similar damage. "But we're pretending, aren't we? Pretending we're okay so everyone else doesn't fall apart." Victoria didn't answer. Admitting weakness felt dangerous. "I heard you last night," Patricia continued quietly. "You and Liam." Victoria's heart stopped. "I don't know what you mean." "Please, I've been married 20 years. I know what kissing sounds like." Patricia's expression wasn't judgmental, just tired. "I'm not going to say anything. Hell, if we're all going to die out here, you might as well find some comfort where you can." "We're not going to die." "You sure about that?" Victoria wanted to say yes, to project the confidence everyone expected from her. But sitting there with bleeding hands and an empty stomach and no sign of rescue, she couldn't force the lie out. "No," she admitted, "I'm not sure about anything anymore." Patricia nodded slowly. "At least you're honest. That's more than most leaders would give." They sat in silence for a while, two women who had nothing in common except survival. Then Patricia stood, brushed off her pants, and went back to work. Liam appeared at Victoria's side a moment later. "We should check the stream for fish, see if we can catch something." "Okay. Just us. The others can finish the weapons." Victoria understood what he really meant. They needed to talk, away from everyone else. She nodded and followed him into the trees. Walking was harder than it should have been. Her ribs ached with every step, and Liam's injured leg made him slow. But they made it to the stream, a narrow ribbon of clear water rushing over smooth stones. "About last night," Liam started. "It was a mistake," Victoria cut him off. "I was scared and not thinking clearly. It shouldn't have happened." "That's it? That's all you're going to say?" "What else is there to say? You work for me, Liam. Even out here, that doesn't change." "Doesn't it?" He turned to face her fully. "Your company is hundreds of miles away. We might never see it again. Out here, we're just two people trying to survive." "No. Out here, you're a single father with a daughter waiting for you, and I'm someone who's been alone so long she doesn't know how to be anything else." Victoria forced herself to meet his eyes. "That kiss was me being selfish, taking comfort I had no right to take." "What if I wanted to give it?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and danger. "It doesn't matter what you wanted," Victoria said, hating herself for the words. "I'm your boss. I have power over your job, your livelihood, your ability to provide for Emma. Anything between us would be inappropriate at best, coercive at worst." "That's corporate handbook bullshit, and you know it." "It's the truth. The truth is you're scared." Liam moved closer, his voice dropping. "Not of me or the power dynamic or any of that. You're scared of actually feeling something for someone." Victoria flinched like he'd slapped her. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? You told me yourself you built walls after your parents died. Well, those walls are crumbling now, and it terrifies you." "Stop it." "Why?" "Because I'm right." He was close enough now that she could feel his warmth. "You kissed me last night because for once in your life you let yourself need someone, and now you're trying to take it back to rebuild those walls before what?" Victoria's voice cracked. "Before I get hurt? Before you realize I'm not worth the trouble? Before—" Liam kissed her and kissed. It was different from last night. Less desperate, more deliberate. His hands cupped her face gently, and Victoria felt something inside her break completely. All the walls, all the carefully constructed defenses, all the years of keeping everyone at arm's length. Gone. She kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer despite every logical reason not to. This was wrong. This was complicated. This was going to end badly. She didn't care. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Liam rested his forehead against hers. "I'm not asking for forever," he said quietly. "I'm not asking for anything except right now. Can you give me that?" Victoria wanted to say no. Wanted to rebuild her walls and go back to being the Ice Queen CEO who didn't need anyone. But sitting here in the wilderness, cold and hungry and possibly dying, forever felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. "Right now," she whispered. "Just right now. That's enough." They stayed by the stream for a while, holding each other, not talking. Victoria let herself feel the warmth of another person, the solid reality of Liam's arms around her. It felt like coming home to a place she'd never known existed. Eventually, they pulled apart and tried to catch fish with their bare hands. It was ridiculous and unsuccessful, and they both ended up soaked, but Victoria found herself laughing for the first time in days. Real laughter, not the polite chuckle she used in board meetings. "We're terrible at this," she gasped, wringing water from her hair. "Absolutely terrible." Liam grinned at her, and the expression transformed his face. "But at least we tried." They returned to camp empty-handed, but somehow lighter. The others had finished making weapons and were attempting to start a fire with mixed results. Victoria joined them, trying to ignore the way Patricia smiled knowingly when she saw Victoria's wet clothes. That afternoon, Kelly surprised everyone by finding a bush full of berries about 50 yards from camp. Chen identified them as safe, blackberries, common, and edible. It wasn't much, but the handful each person got felt like a feast. "We should ration these," Victoria said, even as her stomach screamed for more. "Make them last." "There's more on the bush," Kelly said. Her voice was stronger now, more present. The shock was finally wearing off. We could pick them all before animals get them. They organized a berry-picking expedition, everyone who could walk. It gave them purpose, something productive to do instead of sitting around waiting for rescue that might never come. Victoria worked beside Liam, their hands occasionally brushing as they reached for the same cluster of berries. Each touch sent electricity through her, a constant reminder of what they'd started by the stream. "We can't tell the others," she said quietly. "I know. It would complicate things, make people uncomfortable. I know. I'm not ashamed of you, Victoria." Liam stopped her with a look. "I understand. We keep it private, but we don't deny it either, not to each other." She nodded, relief washing through her. He understood. He always seemed to understand. They filled makeshift containers with berries and returned to camp as the sun started setting. For the first time since the crash, they had food, shelter, water, and weapons. It felt almost sustainable. "We should post watches," Chen suggested, in case Sullivan was right about something out there. Nobody argued. They organized a rotation, 2 people awake at all times, keeping the fire burning, watching the darkness. Victoria volunteered for the midnight shift with Liam. The hours until then passed slowly. They ate their small portions of berries, tended the fire, checked injuries. Liam's leg was healing, finally. The red streaks had faded, and he could put more weight on it. Chen's arm was still useless, but the swelling had decreased. Victoria's ribs hurt constantly, but at least the pain meant they were healing. When midnight came, Patricia woke them for their watch shift. Everyone else settled into sleep, exhausted from the day's work. Victoria sat beside Liam near the fire, close enough to feel his warmth, but not touching. The forest around them was alive with night sounds, insects, small animals, the wind through trees. Every noise made her jump. "Tell me more about Emma," she said, needing distraction from the darkness. Liam smiled. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. What she likes, what she's scared of, what she dreams about." So he told her about a little girl who loved dinosaurs but was terrified of the dark, who wanted to be an astronaut but also a veterinarian, who made him read the same bedtime story every night for 6 months straight because she loved the rhythm of the words. "She sounds amazing," Victoria said. "She is. She's the only purely good thing I've ever done." Liam poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks into the night. "When her mother left, I was so angry. Angry at her for leaving, angry at myself for not seeing it coming. But Emma needed me to not be angry, so I learned to let it go. Or at least to put it away where she couldn't see it. That must have been hard. It was. But Emma made it worth it." He looked at Victoria. "Kids have a way of putting everything in perspective. All my problems, all my worries, they matter less when I'm making her breakfast or helping with homework or listening to her talk about her day. She reminds me what's real." Victoria felt something ache in her chest. "I don't have that, someone who needs me like that. You have 8 people right here who need you. It's not the same. They need me to lead, to make decisions. That's different from being needed just for existing." Liam was quiet for a moment. "You're right. It is different. But maybe you could have it someday, if you let yourself." The implication was clear. Victoria looked away, unable to meet his eyes. The future felt too big, too uncertain. She couldn't think beyond surviving today. "What if we don't get rescued?" she asked quietly. "What if this is it? We just exist out here until we can't anymore. Then we make the best of it. We survive. We find reasons to keep going." Liam shifted closer. "And we don't do it alone." His hand found hers in the firelight. Victoria laced their fingers together, holding on like an anchor. They sat in silence for a while, just breathing together, watching the fire. Then Liam spoke again, his voice low and serious. "I need to tell you something." Victoria's stomach clenched. "What?" "The night of the crash, when I got on the plane last minute, I wasn't thinking about the retreat or keeping my job. I was thinking about you." "Liam, let me finish. I've worked for you for 3 years, and I've watched you build this incredible empire while slowly destroying yourself. You don't eat right. You don't sleep enough. You push everyone away. And I kept thinking, someone needs to take care of her. Someone needs to make her stop. I know you don't need it, but you deserve it anyway." He turned to face her fully. "I got on that plane because the thought of you going to that retreat alone, dealing with those investors without backup, made me feel sick. I told myself it was professional responsibility, but that was a lie. Victoria's heart hammered against her damaged ribs. What was the truth? The truth is I've been half in love with you since about 6 months into working together, when you stayed up all night helping me find emergency childcare so I wouldn't miss a crucial meeting. You didn't have to do that. It wasn't your problem. But you made calls, pulled strings, found a solution. He smiled sadly. That's when I knew you weren't just some cold CEO. You were someone who cared. You just didn't know how to show it. Victoria couldn't breathe. You can't love me. Too late. I'm a mess, Liam. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be what you need. I don't need you to be anything except honest. Can you do that? Can you tell me what you're feeling right now? She wanted to deflect, to retreat behind her walls, but Liam deserved better than that. I'm terrified, she whispered, because I think I might love you too, and I have no idea what to do with that. Liam exhaled and she realized he'd been holding his breath. That's enough. That's more than enough. He kissed her again, soft and sweet and full of promise. Victoria let herself fall into it, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have this. Could have someone who saw all her broken pieces and wanted her anyway. When they broke apart, she rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that for the rest of their watch. Connected, together, real. The night sounds continued around them, but for the first time since the crash, Victoria didn't feel afraid. 2 more days passed without rescue. They fell into a routine: morning water runs, berry picking, fire maintenance, wound care. The group was getting stronger in some ways, healthier, more coordinated, learning to work together. But in other ways, hope was fading. On the 5th day, Sullivan snapped. It started small. He complained about the food, about the cold, about everything. Then he started pacing, muttering to himself. By afternoon, he was shouting. We're never getting out of here. Nobody's coming. We're going to die in this forest and rot, and nobody will ever find us. Sullivan, calm down, Chen started. Don't tell me to calm down. You all keep pretending like everything's fine, like rescue is just around the corner, but it's not. It's been 5 days. If they were going to find us, they would have found us by now. Victoria stood, trying to project calm she didn't feel. Sullivan, I need you to take a breath. No, I'm done taking breaths, done pretending, done with all of this. He was crying now, face red and contorted. I have a wife and kids at home. They think I'm dead. They've probably already had a funeral, and I'm stuck here with you people, slowly starving, waiting to die. We're not going to die, Victoria said firmly. How do you know? How can you possibly know that? She couldn't. That was the horrible truth. She had no idea if rescue was coming, if they'd survive another week, if any of them would see their families again. But she couldn't say that. Couldn't let the fear win. I know because we're still alive, she said. Because we survived a plane crash that should have killed us. Because we've made it 5 days when we could have died on day 1. We're stronger than we think, Sullivan, all of us. That's easy for you to say. You don't have anyone waiting for you. The words hit like a physical blow. Victoria felt Liam tense beside her, but she held up a hand to stop him from intervening. You're right, she said quietly. I don't have a family waiting for me, but I have people here who are depending on me, and I'm not going to let you fall apart and take everyone else with you. Sullivan stared at her, breathing hard. Then something in him broke. He collapsed to his knees, sobbing. Patricia went to him immediately, wrapping her arms around him while he cried. The others stood awkwardly, not knowing what to do. Victoria felt Liam's hand on her lower back, a brief touch of support. She leaned into it slightly, drawing strength. Everyone take a break, she said. Sullivan needs some time. They scattered, giving Sullivan space to break down. Victoria walked to the edge of camp, needing distance from the raw emotion. Liam followed. Of course he did. He's not wrong, Victoria said before Liam could speak. About me not having anyone waiting. That's not true. Isn't it? My company will replace me. My investors will move on. There's no one lying awake at night worrying about me? I am. Victoria turned to look at him. What? I'm lying awake worrying about you, about whether you're eating enough, whether your ribs are healing, whether you're pushing yourself too hard. Liam moved closer. And Emma asked about you. She doesn't even know me. She knows you're important to me. When I called her the night of her play, I told her I was going to the retreat to help my boss with something important. She asked what you were like. He smiled slightly. I told her you were the smartest, strongest, scariest person I'd ever met. She said you sounded like a superhero. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. I'm not a superhero. Maybe not. But you're someone worth coming home for. Someone worth worrying about. Someone worth loving. He cupped her face gently. You matter, Victoria. Not because of what you've built or what you can do, just because you exist. The words broke something inside her. Victoria buried her face in his chest and cried for the first time since the crash. All the fear and pain and exhaustion came pouring out, and Liam just held her, letting her fall apart in a way she'd never allowed herself before. When she finally stopped crying, she felt lighter. Raw, but lighter. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. The real me, not the CEO version. That's the only version I want. They stood together at the edge of camp, holding each other while the afternoon sun filtered through the trees. And for a moment, Victoria let herself imagine a future where this was real, where they made it home and built something together. Then Sullivan screamed. They ran back to camp to find him pointing at the sky, his face transformed with desperate hope. A plane! I heard a plane! Everyone froze, listening. And there it was, the distant drone of an engine, faint but unmistakable. There! Kelly shouted, pointing. A small aircraft, barely visible against the clouds, moving across the sky about a mile away. They erupted into action. Patricia grabbed anything reflective, metal scraps from the wreckage, and started waving them frantically. Chen threw green branches on the fire, creating thick smoke. Everyone shouted and waved and prayed to be seen. The plane continued its path, steady and unchanging. They don't see us, Sullivan moaned. They're not stopping. Keep signaling, Victoria ordered. Don't stop. They kept trying, kept waving and shouting until their voices gave out, and the plane disappeared over the horizon. Silence fell over the camp, heavy and crushing. They didn't see us, Chen said hollowly. Victoria watched the empty sky, feeling hope drain away. They'd been so close. Rescue had been right there, and they'd missed it. They're searching, she said, forcing strength into her voice. That means they know we're out here somewhere. They'll come back. They'll find us. But even she didn't believe it anymore. That night, Victoria's watch shift was with Patricia. They sat by the fire while the others slept, both lost in their own thoughts. It's been 6 days, Patricia said quietly. 6 days and one plane that didn't see us. What if that's it? What if that was our only chance? Then we make our own chance. We survive until the next plane or the one after that. How long can we survive? The berries won't last forever. We can't catch fish. We don't know what else is edible out here. Patricia looked at her. How long, Victoria? I don't know. At least you're honest. Patricia poked the fire. My husband must think I'm dead. We've been married 20 years, and I never even told him I loved him before I left for this trip. Just kissed him goodbye and walked out the door. You'll tell him when we get home. Will I? Or will we die out here having never said the things that mattered? Patricia's voice cracked. I don't want to die with regrets. Victoria thought about Liam, sleeping 20 feet away, about the feelings they'd finally acknowledged, about the future they might never have. Neither do I, she said softly. Then don't. Whatever you're holding back, whoever you're afraid to be honest with, don't wait. We might not have time to wait. The words settled over Victoria like a weight. Patricia was right. Every day they spent in the wilderness was another day they might not survive. Another chance to say what mattered, lost. When Liam woke for his watch shift, Victoria pulled him aside. We need to talk, she said. That sounds ominous. It's not. She took a breath. I don't want to die with regrets, and I need you to know that these past few days, being with you, it's been the most real I've felt in years. Maybe ever. Liam's expression softened. Victoria, I'm not done. When we get rescued, if we get rescued, things are going to be complicated. My company, our jobs, all of it. But out here, right now, nothing else matters except this. Except us. She met his eyes. So I'm choosing to not regret it. I'm choosing you for however long we have. Liam kissed her, deep and desperate. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "We're going to make it home," he said fiercely. "Both of us. And when we do, we'll figure out the rest. Together." "Together," Victoria echoed. They held each other in the darkness, and for the first time since the crash, Victoria felt something like peace. Whatever happened next, rescue or death, survival or loss, she wouldn't face it alone. She had someone who saw her, truly saw her, and loved her anyway. That was worth more than any empire she'd ever built. The helicopter appeared on the 8th day, when hope had become something they talked about in past tense. Victoria was checking Liam's leg wound when she heard it, the unmistakable thump of rotor blades cutting through air. For a second, she thought exhaustion was making her hallucinate. Then everyone else heard it too. "Helicopter!" Chen shouted, scrambling to his feet. "There's a helicopter!" They exploded into motion. The fire got doused with green branches, creating massive plumes of smoke. Metal scraps waved frantically in the air. 8 voices screamed themselves hoarse, begging to be seen. The helicopter banked toward them. "They see us!" Patricia sobbed. "Oh my God, they see us!" Victoria felt Liam's hand grip hers tightly. She squeezed back, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. After 8 days of survival, of wondering if they'd die in the wilderness, rescue was finally here. The helicopter landed in the clearing they'd created around camp. The door opened and 2 paramedics jumped out, followed by a rescue coordinator in an orange vest. "8 survivors?" the coordinator shouted over the rotor noise. "Yes," Victoria called back. 8 of us. Some injuries, broken bones, lacerations, possible concussions." The paramedics moved efficiently through the group, doing quick assessments. Victoria watched them work, feeling strangely detached. This was real. They were being rescued. She should feel relieved, grateful, ecstatic. Instead, she felt numb. "Ma'am, are you Victoria Hale?" One of the paramedics appeared in front of her, a young woman with kind eyes. "Yes. I'm Sarah. Can you tell me where you're hurt?" "Ribs, left side, probably broken." Sarah's hands were gentle as she examined Victoria's ribcage. "Any difficulty breathing? Coughing up blood?" "No, just pain." "Okay, we're going to get you to a hospital and get everything checked out." Sarah moved to Liam next. "And you are?" "Liam Carter. Leg injury. It's healing." Sarah unwrapped the makeshift bandage and whistled softly. "That's infected. When did this happen?" 8 days ago. The crash. You've been treating it yourselves this whole time?" At Liam's nod, Sarah shook her head in amazement. "You did a good job. Probably saved the leg." The helicopter couldn't take everyone at once. The most seriously injured went first. Chen with his broken arm, Sullivan with his concussion, Kelly, who was still fragile from shock. Victoria insisted on staying with the second group, along with Liam and Patricia. As the helicopter lifted off with the first 4 survivors, the forest suddenly felt very quiet. "Weird, isn't it?" Patricia said. 8 days of praying for rescue, and now that it's here, I almost don't want to leave." Victoria understood. Out here, everything had been simple. Survival, basic needs, no complications beyond staying alive. Going back meant facing reality again, the company, the board, the media circus that would inevitably follow. Going back meant her relationship with Liam would have to exist in the real world, where she was his boss and he was her employee and everything was infinitely more complicated. "You okay?" Liam asked quietly. "I don't know," Victoria admitted. "Are you?" "Emma," he said simply. "I just need to see Emma. The rest we'll figure out." The helicopter returned 30 minutes later. This time, Victoria climbed aboard without hesitation. She needed to leave before she started overthinking, before the weight of what came next paralyzed her. Liam sat beside her, his hand finding hers as they lifted off. Through the window, Victoria watched their camp disappear below. The tarp shelter, the fire pit, the small clearing that had been their entire world for over a week. Then they were over the trees, and she saw how vast the wilderness really was. Miles and miles of unbroken forest. They could have wandered for weeks and never found civilization. "How did you find us?" she asked the coordinator. "Satellite imagery picked up smoke from your fire 2 days ago, but we couldn't get choppers out due to weather. Finally cleared this morning." He studied her. "You folks are lucky. We were about to expand the search radius another 100 miles. Much longer, and we might have missed you entirely." Lucky. Victoria supposed they were. 6 people dead, but 8 alive. It could have been so much worse. The flight to the nearest hospital took 40 minutes. Victoria watched mountains give way to foothills, then civilization, roads, buildings, people living normal lives who had no idea what she'd just survived. The hospital was chaos. Reporters already camped outside, cameras flashing as the helicopter landed on the roof pad. Victoria caught a glimpse of news vans and satellite trucks before the paramedics rushed them inside. Ms. Hale! Ms. Hale, can you tell us what happened? How many survivors? Is it true the plane exploded? The questions followed them through the doors until security cut the press off. Then it was all fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells, and doctors asking questions while nurses hooked up IVs and monitors. They separated Victoria from Liam immediately, wheeling them to different examination rooms. She wanted to protest, to demand they stay together, but exhaustion and pain and the sheer overwhelming return to civilization stole her voice. A doctor examined her ribs, ordered x-rays, confirmed 2 fractures that were already healing. You're lucky, Bet, he said, echoing the rescue coordinator. Another few days without treatment and you could have developed pneumonia. Lucky. That word again. They admitted her overnight for observation. A private room, clean sheets, a bed that didn't smell like smoke. Victoria should have been grateful. Instead, she felt trapped. She asked about Liam 3 times before a nurse finally told her he was in surgery. The infection in his leg required debridement and IV antibiotics. He'd be in recovery for a few hours. That night, lying in a hospital bed with pain medication dulling her senses, Victoria stared at the ceiling and tried to process everything that had happened. 8 days ago, she'd been a billionaire CEO flying to an investor retreat. Now she was a plane crash survivor and nothing felt real anymore. Her phone sat on the bedside table, powered on for the first time in over a week. 53 missed calls, hundreds of emails, text messages from board members, investors, competitors offering sympathy that felt more like circling vultures. She ignored all of it and sent one text. To Liam, "Are you okay?" The response came 20 minutes later. "Out of surgery. Leg's going to be fine. How are you?" Victoria stared at the message, trying to figure out how to answer honestly. "I don't know. Everything feels wrong. I know. It's too much too fast. Can I see you?" A long pause. Then, "They're keeping me in recovery overnight. Tomorrow? Tomorrow." Victoria set the phone down and closed her eyes. Tomorrow. She could survive until tomorrow. She fell asleep to the sound of machines beeping and nurses making rounds, and dreamed of fire and darkness, and Liam's hand holding hers in the wilderness. Morning brought Richard Zhao, her chief operating officer, and Margaret Chen, her head of legal. They appeared in her hospital room at 7 a.m. sharp, both wearing expensive suits and expressions of practiced concern. "Victoria, thank God you're alive," Richard said, but his eyes were already calculating. "The board has been in crisis mode since the crash. We need to discuss next steps." "Good morning to you too, Richard." "I'm sorry. You're right. How are you feeling?" "Like I survived a plane crash. What's the crisis?" Margaret stepped forward, tablet in hand. "The stock dropped 18% when news of the crash broke. We've stabilized it somewhat by announcing you survived, but investors are nervous. They want to see you, hear from you directly." "I just got rescued yesterday." "I understand, but perception matters. The longer you're invisible, the more rumors spread about your condition, your ability to lead." "My ability to lead is fine," Victoria snapped. "I kept 8 people alive in the wilderness for over a week. I think I can handle a board meeting." Richard and Margaret exchanged glances. "Of course," Richard said carefully. "We're just trying to protect the company. And you." Victoria studied them both. These were people she'd worked with for years, people she'd trusted to run her empire. But after 8 days in the wilderness with Liam, their corporate Polish felt hollow, performative. "What else?" she asked. Margaret pulled up something on her tablet. "There's the matter of liability. 6 passengers died in the crash, including 2 board members. Their families are already asking questions. We need to get ahead of any potential lawsuits." Lawsuits. It's unfortunate, but necessary to discuss. The company provided the aircraft, arranged the flight. If there's any finding of negligence, people died, Margaret. 6 people. And your first concern is lawsuits? My first concern is protecting you and the company from— Get out! Both Richard and Margaret froze. Excuse me? Richard said. Get out of my room, both of you. I just survived a traumatic event, and I'm not discussing stock prices and legal liability before I've even been discharged. Victoria's voice was ice. Come back in 3 days. I'll be ready to talk then. Victoria, be reasonable. That's Ms. Hale, and I'm being perfectly reasonable. You're dismissed. They left. Margaret's expression pinched with disapproval. Richard's carefully neutral. The moment the door closed, Victoria felt some of the tension drain from her shoulders. This was her world. Corporate politics, stock prices, legal maneuvering. She'd built it, controlled it, thrived in it for years. But after the wilderness, it felt suffocating. A nurse came in to check her vitals. You have another visitor, she said. Liam Carter? He's in a wheelchair but insists he needs to see you. Victoria's heart jumped. Send him in. Liam appeared moments later, his injured leg elevated, looking exhausted but alive. The nurse positioned his wheelchair beside Victoria's bed and left them alone. Hey, he said. Hey yourself? Victoria reached for his hand. How's the leg? Full of antibiotics and spite. Doctor says I'll keep it, which is good news. He studied her face. You look terrible. Back at you. They sat in silence for a moment, just holding hands, anchored by each other's presence. My COO and head of legal were just here, Victoria said finally. Already trying to manage the crisis, protect the company, prepare for lawsuits. That's their job. I know, but it felt wrong. 6 people died, Liam, and they're worried about stock prices. Welcome back to civilization. Liam's voice was gentle but understanding. Out there, things were simple. Life or death. Here, everything's complicated again. I'm not ready for complicated. Neither am I, but we don't have a choice. He squeezed her hand. Emma's here. My sister brought her this morning. She's in the waiting room. Victoria felt her stomach clench. She must have been terrified. She was. She is. Liam's voice cracked slightly. I need to see her, Victoria. I need to hold my daughter and prove to her I'm real. Of course, go. Be with her. I wanted to see you first. Make sure you were okay. I'm fine. Go to Emma. Liam hesitated. What happens now with us? The question Victoria had been avoiding. In the wilderness, they'd been 2 people surviving together. Here, she was a billionaire CEO, and he was her executive assistant. The power dynamic, the professional implications, the sheer impossibility of it all came crashing down. I don't know, she admitted, but we'll figure it out. Like we figured out everything else. Together? Together. Liam leaned forward and kissed her, soft and brief. Then the nurse returned to wheel him to the waiting room, and Victoria was alone again. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine what came next, returning to work, facing the board, rebuilding her company's image, and somehow, some way, finding room in that life for Liam and whatever this thing between them was becoming. It felt impossible. But then again, so had surviving a plane crash. Victoria was discharged 2 days later, against medical advice, but she couldn't stand another minute in the hospital. She returned to her penthouse apartment in Manhattan and found it exactly as she'd left it, pristine, expensive, and utterly empty. Her assistant had stocked the fridge, left fresh flowers on the counter, ensured everything was perfect for her return. But standing in her living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture, Victoria felt more alone than she had in the wilderness. Her phone rang constantly. Board members, investors, reporters requesting interviews. She ignored most of them and focused on the one call that mattered. How's Emma? She asked when Liam answered. Clingy. She won't let me out of her sight. His voice was warm with affection. She's been sleeping in my room, following me to the bathroom. I think it'll take a while for her to believe I'm really home. That's understandable. How are you? Really? Victoria looked around her empty apartment. Adjusting. It's strange being back. Yeah, everything feels different now. They talked for a few more minutes before Emma demanded her father's attention. After hanging up, Victoria sat on her expensive couch in her expensive apartment and felt the loneliness settle over her like a blanket. This was her life. This was what she'd built. And for the first time, she wondered if it was enough. The board meeting happened 3 days after her discharge. Victoria walked into the conference room in her usual armor, designer suit, perfect hair, expression of absolute confidence. The board members stood when she entered, applauding her survival. It felt obscene. "Thank you all for coming," she said, taking her seat at the head of the table. "I know the past 2 weeks have been challenging for everyone. We're just grateful you're alive," one of the investors said. "The company needs your leadership now more than ever." "Actually, that's what I wanted to discuss." Victoria folded her hands on the table. "I've been doing some thinking about the future of the company and my role in it." Richard Zhao's expression sharpened. "What kind of thinking?" "The crash gave me perspective, made me reevaluate my priorities." She looked around the table at faces that had been her entire world for a decade. "I've spent 10 years building this company, 10 years sacrificing everything, my health, my relationships, my personal life, and I'm starting to wonder if that sacrifice was worth it." Shocked silence. "Victoria, you're not thinking clearly," Margaret said carefully. "You've been through a trauma. Perhaps you should take more time to recover before making any major decisions." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years." Victoria's voice was calm, certain. "I'm not saying I'm leaving, but I am saying things need to change. I need to change." "What does that mean practically?" Richard asked. "It means I'm delegating more, trusting the executive team to handle day-to-day operations, working reasonable hours instead of living in the office." She paused. "It means having a life outside this company." More silence. Then one of the older board members spoke up. "Ms. Hale, with all due respect, your total commitment to this company is what made it successful. If you start backing away, then the company will have to succeed without my total commitment, or it will fail. Either way, I'm making this change." The meeting devolved into arguments, concerned trolling, and thinly veiled threats about investor confidence. Victoria sat through it all with practiced patience, then dismissed them with a promise to provide a detailed transition plan within the week. She left the building and walked 3 blocks before the shaking started. Her hands trembled so badly she had to stop and lean against a building, breathing through the anxiety. She'd just threatened everything she'd built, told her board she was stepping back, reducing her role, potentially weakening the company. It went against every instinct she'd developed over 10 years of ruthless ambition. But in the wilderness, she'd learned that survival meant more than success. And she was choosing to survive this time, not just succeed. Her phone buzzed, a text from Liam. "How did it go?" Victoria typed back with shaking hands. "I think I just committed corporate suicide." The response came immediately. "Or maybe you just started living. Want to talk about it?" "Yes." "Where are you?" "Home with Emma. Come over. She wants to meet you." Victoria stared at the message. Liam was inviting her to his home, to meet his daughter, the most important person in his life. It was a huge step, maybe too huge given how undefined their relationship still was. She typed back, "I'd love to." Liam's apartment was in Queens, a modest 2-bedroom in a building that had seen better decades. Victoria took an Uber there, feeling overdressed in her business suit among the neighborhood's casual atmosphere. Liam answered the door with Emma attached to his leg, a small girl with wild brown hair and her father's eyes. "Hi," Victoria said, suddenly nervous. "You must be Emma." Emma studied her seriously. "You're my dad's boss." "I am." "He said you survived the plane crash together, that you were very brave." Victoria glanced at Liam, who smiled encouragingly. "Your dad was the brave one. He kept us all alive." "That's what dads do," Emma said matter-of-factly. Then, apparently deciding Victoria had passed some test, she grabbed her hand. "Want to see my dinosaur collection?" Sure." Emma dragged her inside, chattering about velociraptors and T-Rexes while Liam followed, laughing. His apartment was small but lived in, full of Emma's artwork on the fridge and toys in the corner and the comfortable chaos of actual life. It was nothing like Victoria's sterile penthouse. It was warm and real and full of love. Emma showed her every dinosaur, explained their names and habitats and which ones could beat which in a fight. Victoria sat on the floor of this child's bedroom and listened with genuine interest, charmed despite herself. "I like her, Dad," Emma announced when she'd exhausted her dinosaur knowledge. "Can she stay for dinner?" Liam looked at Victoria. "Can you?" "I'd like that." Dinner was spaghetti and meatballs, simple and perfect. Emma talked non-stop, asking Victoria questions about being a CEO and whether she liked dinosaurs, and if she thought astronauts would ever find fossils on Mars. Liam cooked and managed his daughter's enthusiasm with practiced ease. This was his life. Not boardrooms and power plays, but homework help and bedtime stories, and the beautiful mundane reality of raising a child. Victoria had never wanted it before, had never imagined herself in a domestic situation, playing house, being part of someone else's family. But sitting at Liam's small kitchen table, listening to Emma's elaborate theory about time-traveling dinosaurs, she felt something shift inside her. A want she'd never acknowledged, a possibility she'd never considered. After dinner, Emma fell asleep on the couch during a movie. Liam carried her to bed, and Victoria waited in the living room, studying the pictures on the walls. Liam and Emma at the zoo, at the park, building a snowman, a life documented in photographs. "Sorry about the interrogation," Liam said when he returned. "She's been asking about you since I got home." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you're someone important to me." He moved closer. "That I care about you." "Liam, we need to talk about what happens now. Realistically." "I know." They sat on the couch together, and Victoria forced herself to voice the concerns that had been building since rescue. "I'm your boss. That creates a power dynamic that makes any relationship between us ethically questionable at best. So I'll find a new job." "Don't be ridiculous. You're the best assistant I've ever had." "Then promote me. Give me a different role where we're not in direct reporting relationship." Victoria shook her head. "It's not that simple. People will talk. The board will have opinions. Investors might see it as unprofessional." "Let them talk. Let them have opinions." Liam took her hands. "Victoria, in the wilderness, we promised each other no regrets. Are you really going to let corporate politics dictate your personal life?" "My personal life affects the company. Everything I do reflects on the business." "That's what you've been telling yourself for 10 years, but it's not true. You're allowed to be a person, not just a CEO." The words hit hard because they were exactly what she needed to hear. Victoria had spent so long being the company that she'd forgotten how to be anything else. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't know how to do this. How to be in a relationship, how to be part of Emma's life, how to balance any of it with running a billion-dollar company." "You don't have to know everything right now. We'll figure it out as we go." Liam squeezed her hands. "But I need you to decide if you want to try. Because if you don't, if the company is more important than this, than us, then tell me now. I'll understand. I'll go back to being your assistant, and we'll pretend the wilderness never happened." Victoria looked at him. This man who'd seen her at her worst and lowest and most vulnerable. Who'd held her while she cried and kissed her in the darkness and chosen her every single day they'd been stranded. The choice should have been hard. Career versus relationship. Power versus love. Everything she'd built versus something completely uncertain. But sitting in his small apartment, knowing his daughter slept in the next room, feeling more at home than she did in her expensive penthouse, the choice was surprisingly easy. "I want to try," she said. Liam's smile was bright enough to light the room. He pulled her close and kissed her, and Victoria let herself fall into it, into him, into the terrifying possibility of actually being happy. When they finally broke apart, she rested her head on his shoulder. "This is going to be complicated," she murmured. "Probably. The board is going to lose their minds. Let them. I have no idea what I'm doing." "Neither do I." Liam pressed a kiss to her hair. "But we survived a plane crash. We can survive this too." Victoria closed her eyes and let herself believe it. She'd spent 10 years building an empire alone. Maybe it was time to try building something with someone else, even if it meant risking everything she'd worked for, even if it terrified her, maybe especially because it terrified her. For the first time in a decade, Victoria Hale chose herself over her company, and despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, it felt like the first right decision she'd made in years. The fallout started 3 days later when Margaret Chen requested an emergency meeting. Victoria arrived at her office early Monday morning to find her entire executive team waiting. Richard, Margaret, and 5 other senior directors, all wearing expressions that ranged from concern to openly hostile. "We need to discuss Liam Carter," Margaret said without preamble. Victoria set down her coffee slowly. "What about him?" "He's been coming to the building. Security logged him visiting your office twice last week." Richard pulled out his tablet. "There are also reports of you leaving the building together, having dinner at that Italian place on Fifth Avenue." "I'm aware. I was there." "Victoria, you're dating your executive assistant." Margaret's voice was tight with disapproval. Do you understand the implications, the liability this creates? I understand perfectly, which is why I'm handling it. How exactly? Victoria had known this conversation was coming. She'd spent the weekend preparing for it, talking it through with Liam, making decisions that would change everything. I'm promoting Liam to Director of Strategic Operations, effective immediately. He'll report directly to Richard, not to me. I'm also implementing a company-wide relationship disclosure policy, so this situation is documented and transparent. Silence fell over the room. Richard recovered first. You're promoting him because you're sleeping with him. I'm promoting him because he's qualified and because it eliminates the direct reporting relationship that makes our personal involvement inappropriate. Victoria kept her voice level. Liam has an MBA from Columbia, 5 years of operations experience before joining this company, and he's been managing my schedule and strategic priorities for 3 years. He's more than capable of handling the role. This is going to look terrible, Margaret said, to investors, to the media, to everyone. The CEO dating an employee, then promoting him. The CEO is allowed to have a personal life, and the promotion is based on merit, which we can document extensively. Victoria met each of their eyes in turn. I'm not asking for permission. I'm informing you of my decision. The board will have something to say about this, Richard warned. Then schedule a board meeting. I'll explain it to them myself. The meeting ended badly, with Margaret threatening to consult with outside counsel and Richard muttering about damage control. Victoria sat alone in her office afterward, her hands shaking slightly. She'd just burned bridges she couldn't rebuild. The executive team would never trust her the same way again. Some of them would probably leave, taking their expertise and connections with them. But when her phone buzzed with a text from Liam, Emma wants to know if you're coming to her soccer game Saturday. The anxiety faded slightly. She was choosing differently this time. It was terrifying and possibly career suicide, but it was her choice. Victoria texted back, "What time?" The board meeting happened 2 weeks later. Victoria walked in prepared for battle, her presentation loaded with documentation of Liam's qualifications, the new relationship policy, and legal opinions confirming everything was above board. What she wasn't prepared for was the stack of manila folders waiting at each board member's seat. "What's this?" she asked, picking one up. Gerald Morrison, the same investor she'd demolished in negotiations months ago, smiled coldly. "Background information we thought the board should have, about Mr. Carter's history." Victoria's stomach dropped. She opened the folder and started reading. Financial records showing Liam had declared bankruptcy 6 years ago. A restraining order his ex-wife had filed shortly after Emma's birth, later withdrawn but still on record. Details about his sister's criminal history, drug charges from a decade ago. "This is a hit job," Victoria said quietly. "This is due diligence," Morrison corrected. "You're proposing to give significant power and access to a man with questionable judgment and family connections that present security risks. His bankruptcy was because his wife abandoned him with a newborn and medical bills he couldn't afford. The restraining order was her attempt to gain leverage in a custody dispute that never materialized, and his sister's charges were dropped. She was never convicted of anything. Nevertheless, these are facts the board deserves to consider." Victoria looked around the table at faces she'd worked with for years. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked calculating, already deciding which way the political winds were blowing. "Let me be very clear," she said, her voice dropping to the temperature that made executives nervous. "Liam Carter is the most competent, ethical, and dedicated professional I've ever worked with. He kept 8 people alive in the wilderness for over a week, using nothing but resourcefulness and determination. His personal history is none of your business, and using it to undermine him is despicable. Your personal involvement clouds your judgment," Morrison said smoothly, "which is exactly why relationships between executives and subordinates are problematic. He's not my subordinate anymore. I restructured the reporting line specifically to address that concern. After you started sleeping with him, the timing is suspicious at best." Victoria felt rage building behind her professional mask. These people, these men in expensive suits who'd never done anything more difficult than negotiate from positions of power, were trying to destroy Liam because he dared to be with her. "I'm not defending my personal life to this board," she said. "You have 2 choices. Accept my restructuring plan and the relationship disclosure, or accept my resignation. Those are your only options." The room erupted, board members talking over each other, some demanding she reconsider, others calling for a vote. Morrison sat back with a satisfied smile, clearly having achieved exactly the chaos he'd wanted. Richard Zhao stood up. Everyone, please, let's take a 10-minute recess. Miss Hale, can I speak with you privately? They stepped into an empty conference room. Richard closed the door and turned to her with an expression she couldn't read. You're serious about this, he said. About him? Yes. Even if it costs you the company? Victoria thought about Emma's soccer game last Saturday, how Liam had cheered from the sidelines while Victoria sat in the bleachers feeling completely out of place, but somehow exactly where she belonged. How Emma had run to her after scoring a goal, hugging her with the unself-conscious affection of a child who'd decided Victoria was worth loving. The company was supposed to be my legacy, she said quietly. But what kind of legacy is it if I sacrificed everything real to build it? If I die alone in a penthouse surrounded by quarterly reports? That's very philosophical, but it doesn't answer my question. Yes, Richard, even if it costs me the company, because I finally figured out that success without someone to share it with is just elaborate loneliness. Richard studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, then here's what we're going to do. You're going to go back in there and tell Morrison to go to hell, professionally. I'm going to second your restructuring plan and call for a vote. And we're going to see exactly how much power you still have with this board. Victoria felt something tight in her chest loosen. Why are you helping me? Because I've watched you build this company for 10 years, and I've never seen you smile until you came back from that crash. Whatever Carter did for you out there, it's worth fighting for. He moved toward the door, then paused. Also, Morrison's trying to engineer a takeover. This relationship thing is just his excuse to undermine you, so beating him serves my purposes too. That's more like the Richard I know. I contain multitudes. He opened the door. Ready to fight? Always. They returned to the boardroom, and Victoria did exactly what Richard suggested. She told Morrison his concerns were noted and dismissed, called for a vote on the restructuring plan, and watched as the board split almost perfectly down the middle. It came down to one vote. Gerald Morrison's. He sat there for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. If he voted against her, the plan failed, and Victoria would have to choose between her relationship and her company. If he voted for it, he lost this particular battle but kept her contained within the board structure. I vote yes, he said finally, with the stipulation that any future relationships between executives be disclosed immediately and reviewed by the ethics committee. Agreed, Victoria said. The plan passed. Liam would be promoted, the relationship would be documented and official, and Victoria would keep her company. For now. She left the meeting exhausted and shaking, went straight to her car and called Liam. How bad? He asked immediately. Bad. But we survived. The plan passed. What did it cost you? Morrison has ammunition now. He'll use this to chip away at my authority. Some of the board members will never trust my judgment again. She leaned her head back against the seat. I might have just started a slow-motion coup against myself. Do you regret it? Victoria thought about the question seriously. Did she regret choosing Liam over the uncomplicated dictatorship she'd had before? Regret opening herself up to vulnerability and attack? No, she said. I don't regret it. She could hear the smile in his voice. Good, because Emma made you a card. She's very insistent you need to come see it tonight. What's it say? I'm not spoiling the surprise. Get over here. Victoria drove to Queens to the modest apartment that had become more home than her penthouse ever was. Emma met her at the door with a construction paper card covered in glitter and drawings of dinosaurs. It says, "Thank you for making my dad happy," Emma explained, pointing to the crayon words. Because he's been smiling a lot since you started coming over. He used to look sad sometimes when he thought I wasn't watching. Victoria felt her throat tighten. She knelt down to Emma's level. That's the nicest card anyone's ever given me. Really? But you're super important. Don't people give you cards all the time? They give me reports and presentations, but nobody's ever thanked me for making them happy before. Emma considered this seriously. That seems sad. Being important should make people happy. Out of the mouths of children. Victoria hugged her carefully, this little girl who'd accidentally taught her more about what mattered than any business degree. Over the next 3 months, Victoria rebuilt her life from the inside out. She hired a new executive assistant, a competent woman in her 50s who had no interest in working 70-hour weeks. She delegated responsibilities she'd been hoarding for years, trusting her executive team to handle things without her constant oversight. She started leaving the office at 6 p.m. most days, a change so dramatic that office gossip exploded. The media had a field day with her relationship. Billionaire CEO's wilderness romance appeared in 3 tabloids. Business journals ran think pieces about workplace relationships and power dynamics. Her investor calls always included at least one passive-aggressive question about whether her personal life was affecting her professional judgment. Morrison made his move 4 months after the plane crash. He orchestrated a vote of no confidence, arguing that Victoria's recent decision showed she was no longer fit to lead the company she'd built. The vote failed, but barely. Victoria won by 3 votes. "You're bleeding power," Richard told her after the meeting. "Every decision you make that prioritizes your personal life over the company, Morrison uses it to turn the board against you." "Then maybe I'm not the right CEO anymore," Victoria said. Richard stared at her. "You're not serious." "I'm completely serious. I built this company to prove I could, to fill a hole left by losing my parents. But it's not filling anything anymore. It's just consuming me." "So what are you going to say? Walk away from billions of dollars?" "I'm saying maybe success looks different than I thought it did." That night, lying in Liam's bed while he slept beside her and Emma snored softly in the next room, Victoria made a decision. She scheduled a press conference for the following week. The announcement shocked everyone. Victoria Hale, youngest billionaire CEO in America, was stepping down from day-to-day operations. She'd remain as board chair, but operational control would transfer to Richard Zhao as the new CEO. "I built this company when I was young and ambitious and had something to prove," she told the packed room of reporters. "But the plane crash taught me that success without meaning is just expensive emptiness. I'm choosing to live differently now, to prioritize differently." "Is this about Liam Carter?" someone shouted. "This is about me. About deciding that my life is worth more than my company, that relationships and personal growth and actually being present matter more than quarterly earnings." She smiled slightly. "Though yes, Liam is part of that decision. He and his daughter reminded me what it feels like to be part of something real." "Do you regret building the company?" "Not at all. I'm proud of what we've created. But I also know when it's time to let go, to trust other people to carry it forward while I figure out who I am beyond this job." The stock price dropped 8% in the following week. Investors panicked. Analysts downgraded their recommendations. Competitors circled like sharks, scenting blood. Victoria watched it all from the outside for the first time in 10 years and felt nothing but relief. She moved out of her penthouse and into a townhouse in Brooklyn, smaller, warmer, with enough space for Emma to have her own room when she stayed over. She started attending Emma's school events, learning to braid hair, figuring out how to be part of a family she hadn't built herself. It was harder than running a company, more complicated than any negotiation. Some days she felt completely lost, uncertain if she was doing any of it right. But Liam was patient, Emma was forgiving, and slowly, Victoria learned to be someone beyond the CEO title. 6 months after stepping down, she enrolled in a trauma counseling certification program. She'd been meeting with survivors of the crash, the ones who'd lived, helping them process what they'd been through. Patricia had suggested she might be good at it, and Victoria discovered she was right. Using her experience to help others felt more meaningful than any board meeting she'd ever run. "You seem happy," Liam said one evening. They were cooking dinner together, a normal weeknight routine that still felt novel to Victoria. Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table, occasionally asking questions about fractions. "I am happy. It's weird." "Why is it weird?" "Because I spent 30 years thinking happiness was something other people had, that success was more important, more achievable. Turns out I was wrong about both." Liam kissed her temple. "You weren't wrong. You just had to learn the hard way." Emma looked up from her homework. "Dad, what's 3/4 of 16? "What do you think it is? 12? "Show me how you got that." Victoria watched them work through the math problem together, this man who'd saved her life in more ways than one, and the daughter who'd accepted her with open arms. This was her life now. Homework help and family dinners and learning to be present instead of always reaching for the next achievement. A year after the crash, Victoria stood at Liam's apartment door with a folder in her hands and nerves in her stomach. You're being mysterious, Liam said when he let her in. What's in the folder? Emma around? Sleep over at a friend's. It's just us. He studied her face. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I just need to show you something. They sat on the couch, and Victoria opened the folder. Inside were legal documents, financial statements, and a letter from her lawyer. I'm setting up a trust fund for Emma, she said. Full ride to any college she wants, plus living expenses. It's completely separate from you and me. She gets it regardless of what happens with our relationship. Liam stared at the papers. Victoria, this is too much. It's not. She's important to you, which makes her important to me. And I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Let me do this. This says $2 million. Plus investment growth should be around $4 million by the time she's 18. Liam set the papers down carefully. I can't accept this. You're not accepting it. Emma is. And you can't stop me because the trust is already established. Victoria took his hand. Liam, you gave me my life back. Let me give Emma her future. He was quiet for a long time, staring at the documents. Then his shoulders started shaking, and Victoria realized he was crying. Hey, she said softly, pulling him close. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, everything's right, and it's overwhelming. He looked at her with wet eyes. I spent 7 years terrified I couldn't give Emma everything she deserved, that my failures would limit her future, and you just erased that fear in 30 seconds. Your love already gave her everything she needs. This is just money. It's not just money. It's security. It's opportunity. It's... His voice broke. Thank you. Victoria held him while he cried, this strong man who'd held her together in the wilderness and felt something settle into place. This was what love looked like. Not grand gestures or perfect moments, but showing up for each other, using what you had to make life easier for the people you cared about. The legal documents weren't romantic, but they were real. That night, wrapped together in Liam's bed, he asked the question she'd been expecting. What happens next? For us? What do you want to happen? Honestly, I want this. Exactly this. You and me and Emma building something together. He traced patterns on her arm. But I know you're used to more. The penthouse, the private jets, the entire life you gave up. I didn't give it up. I chose differently. Victoria turned to face him. I still have money, still have influence, still have the ability to do significant things. I'm just doing them for different reasons now. Do you miss it? The power? Sometimes. I miss the certainty of it, the clear metrics of success. But I don't miss the loneliness. She kissed him softly. I like this version of my life better. It's messier and scarier, and I have no idea if I'm doing any of it right. But I'm not alone anymore. You're doing it right, Liam said. Emma adores you. I love you. That's the only metric that matters. I love you. He'd said it casually, like it was obvious, like it was just another fact about their life together. But it was the first time either of them had said the words out loud. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too, both of you. This whole chaotic, complicated, beautiful thing we're building. They made love slowly, tenderly, without the desperation of the wilderness, but with something deeper. Trust, commitment, the quiet certainty that this was real and worth protecting. Afterward, lying in the darkness, Victoria thought about how far she'd traveled from the woman who'd boarded that plane. That woman had been successful, powerful, and completely alone. This woman was less powerful, more vulnerable, and happier than she'd ever imagined possible. The trade was worth it. Emma's 8th birthday party happened 2 months later, and Victoria found herself in a park in Queens surrounded by 20 screaming children, helping to set up a dinosaur-themed treasure hunt. You're a natural, Patricia said, appearing at her elbow. The older woman had kept in touch after the crash, and they'd developed an unlikely friendship. I'm terrified I'm going to break one of them. They're resilient, much more so than corporations. Patricia handed her a balloon. How's retirement treating you? I'm not retired. I'm restructured. Right. And how's that going? And Victoria looked across the park to where Liam was organizing the treasure hunt, Emma bouncing excitedly beside him. It's good. Really good. Scary, but good. You made the right choice, Patricia said quietly. Walking away from all that power to build something real. Most people never have the courage. I didn't have courage. I just finally figured out what mattered. The party was chaos. Kids ran everywhere. Cake got smashed into the grass. Someone cried because they didn't win the treasure hunt. It was loud and messy and utterly exhausting. Victoria loved every minute of it. As the sun set and parents collected their sugar-crashed children, Emma threw her arms around Victoria's waist. "Best birthday ever," she declared. "Thank you for helping." "You're welcome, sweetheart." "Are you going to marry my dad?" The question came out of nowhere, innocent and devastating. Victoria looked at Liam, who'd gone very still. "I don't know," Victoria said honestly. "Would you be okay if I did?" Emma considered this seriously. "Will you still do treasure hunts with me?" "Absolutely." "And help with homework?" "When I can." "Okay then. I think you should marry him. He's less sad when you're around." She ran off to say goodbye to her friends, leaving Victoria and Liam staring at each other. "Sorry," Liam said. "She's been asking me about it for weeks. I kept telling her it was complicated." "Is it complicated?" "I don't know." "Is it?" Victoria thought about the question seriously. A year ago, the answer would have been an immediate yes. Marriage meant vulnerability, meant legally and emotionally tying herself to another person, meant giving up the independence she'd guarded so carefully. But that was a year ago, before the crash, before she'd learned that independence without connection was just isolation in expensive packaging. "No," she said, "I don't think it's complicated at all." Liam's expression shifted, hope and fear mixing together. "Victoria, I'm not proposing, not here, not like this. But I'm saying I want that future, with you, with Emma, the whole messy, complicated, beautiful thing." He kissed her there in the park, surrounded by deflating balloons and birthday cake remnants, and it felt like a promise. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony with just family and the survivors from the crash. No media, no spectacle, just the people who mattered witnessing them choose each other. Emma was the flower girl and took her duties very seriously, scattering petals with the precision of a military operation. Patricia cried through the entire ceremony. Chen made a toast about surviving impossible situations. Even Sullivan showed up, looking healthier than he had in the wilderness, and told terrible jokes that made everyone laugh. Victoria wore a simple dress, not the designer gown she would have chosen in her old life. Liam wore a suit that actually fit him properly for once. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising not perfection but presence, not certainty but commitment. When the officiant pronounced them married, Emma cheered louder than anyone. The reception was at a restaurant in Brooklyn, nothing fancy, just good food and people who cared about each other. Victoria sat at a table with her new husband and stepdaughter and felt a contentment she'd never known existed. "Happy?" Liam asked, his hand covering hers. "Terrified, but yes, happy." "What are you terrified of?" "Screwing this up. Not being a good enough parent to Emma, losing you, all of it." She looked at him. "I spent so long controlling everything that letting life just happen feels dangerous." "It is dangerous. That's what makes it worth doing." Emma climbed into Victoria's lap, tired from dancing. "Are you my mom now?" The question stopped Victoria's heart. "I'm your stepmom. You already have a mom, even if she's not around." "I don't remember her. I just remember you and Dad." Emma settled against her chest. "Can I call you Mom?" Victoria looked at Liam over Emma's head, silently asking permission. He nodded, his eyes wet. "Yes," Victoria whispered. "You can call me Mom." Emma was asleep within minutes, exhausted from the excitement. Victoria held her carefully, this child who'd become hers through choice rather than biology, and felt the last piece of her old self fall away. She wasn't Victoria Hale, billionaire CEO anymore. She was just Victoria. Wife, mother, survivor, person, trying to figure out how to live a life that mattered for the right reasons. It was the best trade she'd ever made. 3 years after the crash, Victoria published a book about survival. Not the wilderness kind, but the everyday kind. About choosing to live instead of just succeeding, about building relationships instead of empires, about being brave enough to want something beyond achievement. It became a surprise bestseller. She donated all the proceeds to a foundation supporting families of aviation accident victims. She still consulted for her old company occasionally, still had a seat on the board, still had influence in the tech world. But it was no longer her identity, just one part of a much larger life. Emma was 11 now, confident and brilliant, already talking about becoming a paleontologist. She called Victoria Mom without hesitation. And Victoria had stopped being surprised by the fierce love she felt for this child, who wasn't hers by blood, but was hers in every way that mattered. Liam had thrived in his new role at the company, eventually becoming Richard's second in command. He still worked hard, but he came home for dinner. He made Emma's school plays and Victoria's book events and never missed the things that mattered. Some nights, lying in bed in the home they'd built together, Victoria thought about the woman who'd boarded that plane 4 years ago. That woman had been powerful and successful and utterly alone, convinced she had everything figured out. The plane crash had destroyed her certainty, stripped away her control, forced her to be vulnerable in ways she'd spent decades avoiding. It had also saved her life. Not from death, though it had done that too, but from the slow dissolution of living without really being alive. From sacrificing everything real on the altar of achievement. From dying successful and alone in an empty penthouse with only quarterly reports for company. The crash had taught her that survival wasn't about being strong enough to do it alone. It was about being brave enough to let people in, to need them, to build something together that was bigger than any individual achievement. "What are you thinking about?" Liam asked, his voice sleepy. "How lucky I am." "Lucky we crashed in the wilderness? Lucky you got on that plane. Lucky we survived. Lucky you were stubborn enough to not let me push you away when we got home." She turned to face him. "Lucky I get to spend the rest of my life with you." "That's not luck, that's choice. You chose this. Every day, you choose this." He was right. And that was the real lesson the wilderness had taught her. Life wasn't about what happened to you, but what you chose to do with it. How you responded when everything fell apart. Who you decided to be when all the pretenses were stripped away. Victoria had chosen love over power, family over empire, being present over being perfect. She'd chosen Liam and Emma and a life that was messy and complicated and real. Best decision she'd ever made. She kissed her husband in the darkness of their bedroom, in the home they'd built together, in the life she'd never planned but couldn't imagine living without. And somewhere in her chest, in the place that had been empty for so long, she felt complete. Not because she'd achieved something or built something or proved something, but because she'd finally learned what it meant to be human. To need and be needed, to love and be loved, to survive not alone, but together. The plane crash had broken her, but from those broken pieces, she'd built something better than she'd ever had before. A life worth living, a family worth choosing, a love worth surviving for. And that was the only empire that really mattered.